Hey guys, welcome to another huge episode of Triggered. And tonight's one's going to be interesting. It's going to be really exciting. I'm actually really looking forward to having this conversation. I know we've sort of discussed this a bunch on the show, but we have Vivek Ramaswamy. He ran an, sort of out of nowhere campaign in a strong race that I think really surpassed most expectations for people out there. So much of the stuff we've talked about on the show is like, hey, I really like what he's saying, but where's the history? Where was the past? And so you guys have been asking a lot of questions about him. So I want to give him the chance to answer all of those. But like I said, I think he exceeded most people's expectations. Winning almost 8%, having never done that before. It was really interesting. And I think he was saying a lot of the right things. And he's bringing in really a lot of fresh energy, first-time voters into the America First movement. I think he was also way ahead of the curve on things like DEI. I know one of the questions we asked is like, hey, do you trust him? Where'd he go? I didn't know where he was in 16, politically, all these things, but he was out there combating a lot of the nonsense in corporate America. I mean, his book, Woke Inc., was out, 4 or 5 years ago. So he got that, which I think, certainly lends a lot of credibility to everything that he's been saying. So we're going to get right into the interview. I literally started, a couple minutes early just to be able to go through the sponsors and talk about it, to be able to maximize the hour we have. There's a lot to talk about. So make sure you guys are also linking, sharing, subscribing, passing it along to your friends so that you never miss an episode. And don't forget, guys, you can also find the episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts after they air here on Rumble. And also, guys, we can't forget our incredible sponsors. So make sure you're also supporting these kinds of business. Part of what we're doing here is not just voting in elections, but voting with our wallets. Make sure to check out The Wellness Company, who's a leading provider in emergency medical kits. Like we saw with COVID, supply chain chaos, lockdowns, Fauci failures, it sort of never seems to end. It can make it hard to get the medicine you and your family need in a time of crisis. And with the Wellness Company's emergency kit, you're empowered to take control of your health. The kit includes 8 life-saving medications, including amoxicillin, the Z-Pak, and vermectin, etc., to help keep on hand, along with a guidebook for safe and easy use. So from tick bites to extreme public health outbreaks, every scenario is covered. Avoid the high costs, avoid the hospital wait lines. Take control of you and your family's health needs. Go to twc.health/triggered. twc.health/triggered for a 15% discount on the emergency medical kit. Again, TWC, like the Wellness Company, .health/triggered. And guys, don't forget about Patriot Mobile. These guys have been leading the charge, combating anti-woke nonsense. They've been donating to conservative causes since they started. They are America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. And I always say, we just got to keep supporting the companies who support you as opposed to the woke companies who hate our guts. And there's a lot of that in telecom. I have a feeling, folks, if you're watching a podcast, you probably have a cell phone. So have a cell phone with Patriot Mobile where you're putting America first with every call while getting the same nationwide coverage as the major carriers. You can keep your phone, you can keep your number. So really nothing changes other than you're not giving your hard-earned dollars to the companies that hate you. So the transition is quick, easy. You keep your phone, you keep your number, and Patriot Mobile provides you dependable wireless service at an affordable price, putting your dollars into action and supporting freedom-loving American values. They literally donate a portion of every dollar to support groups that fight for the First Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, the sanctity of life, and protecting our brave police and first responders. So for free activation, go to patriotmobile.com/triggered. Just like the show, patriotmobile.com/triggered. Vote with your wallet. Send a message to the companies who have been taking your hard-earned dollars for far too long and weaponizing them against you and literally everything that you believe in. So with that, we're going to go right to Vivek. And afterwards, I'm going to stick around and answer a bunch of your questions and all of that. But I'm really looking forward to this one because you really had what I think is a breakout star, someone who handled the media very well, threw their crap back in their face. So with that, joining us now, Vivek Ramaswamy. How's it going, buddy?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I mean, it's been an interesting week. I think you actually did some amazing stuff. I mean, coming out of sort of nowhere from the political spectrum, taking 8% in Iowa. Understanding that, given everything that was going on, that was the path for America first was then to endorse Donald Trump. But I think you brought a lot of new energy to the game, really, which was kind of awesome. Tell me what you felt, what it was like for you doing all that.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'm still processing a lot of it. I'm proud of what we accomplished. Actually, the funniest part is if you look at second choice, to your father, who would people have voted for actually would have been it was a very different story, but I think it's the right person carrying this forward from here. The people have spoken, and so I'm at peace with that element of it. For me, it was really different. I mean, in my background, you and I haven't really spoken at any length before, but my background was from a very different world than this world of politics.
Me too.
I started, yes, it makes a couple of us. I've started a number of different companies. Most of them have gone on to be successful. I have raised two sons with my wife, Apoorva, here in Ohio. We were living our merry life. She's a surgeon at Ohio State. And, I think that I felt called about a year and a half ago, a little less than a year and a half ago, last December before last year, to step up and do my part to revive this country. And I saw that red wave that never came. I felt like this party was lacking of vision, and that you had a lot of people who for a long time had been pointing to the other side and making clever trolling was, I think, part of what we had become as a party, rather than offering an alternative vision of our own. And I felt like I had a vision to offer. I had stepped down from my job as a biotech CEO years before. I wrote several books, and you'll know this well too from your experience, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The process of writing forces you to really examine who you are and what your beliefs are, actually. Like, not just what you say as a quip, but what do you actually believe? And I wrote 3 books in those 2 years. And as I often say, I still believe about 95% of what's in the first one. And you evolve your own thoughts over those years, especially when you've been steeped in the world of business, but have opened your eyes to, BLM, for example. After the George Floyd deaths, there was a demand that I make a statement as a biotech CEO, which I refused to do. And that set me on this new trajectory that ultimately landed in this presidential race that I'm still, frankly, it was a whirlwind. I did not expect necessarily to be getting out that night, but when the results came in, I felt I make my most important decisions I make instinctually. And my instinct that night was that was the right decision. And I'm proud of looking back at the last year of what we accomplished in the meantime.
Yeah, so a lot of the commentary I've gotten, as I told you when we spoke the other day, I was like, "Hey, listen, I like a lot of what he's saying. I love a lot of how he handles the media. That he throws back the facts. He's not afraid. So many on our party, we kowtow around reality because they don't want to hear it, but it doesn't mean it's not the truth. I think maybe." We come from a similar background. I wasn't biotech, but I was a real estate guy. So I came from business and I got sort of thrust into politics. Started writing the books. That you're right. It is a great way of sort of reflecting on what's going on and the stories from the trail and meeting, real Americans who are affected by these disastrous policies, not just from the left or those in charge, but also, again, from sort of the weak people on the right. So, I get where you're coming from on so many of these things. And again, for us, it would have been much easier in life to just be politically agnostic or support the Democrats. There's no consequence to that. But you did start seeing it in business. You wrote a book a couple of years ago with Woke Inc. You started seeing how it was infecting business. You probably experienced that as a CEO, certainly in biotech. That's, definitely, let's just say not just left-leaning, but left, like, fallen over already. How did that evolution get you to start, writing about it, calling it out? Because again, like there's a consequence of being a vocal conservative in business, calling out even just the wokeness within corporate America, started doing that. And did that change a lot of your views, as it related to politics beyond just sort of the woke virus?
It did. Yeah, that was sort of where I started my entry ramp into this world that we're in. So I had, overseen the development of a number of medicines. 5 of them are FDA-approved products today. We could have developed every one of them, by the way, for a tiny fraction of the cost if the FDA had not been as onerous because of pharma lobbying, but that's a story for another day. But anyway, I was overseeing the development of medicines. One of them is a life-saving therapy in kids. One day, George Floyd dies, and then suddenly there's a demand that every CEO, tech CEO, biotech CEO, et cetera, make a statement on behalf of BLM, make some donations, and I refused to do it. And there was turns out, tremendous social and even business cost associated with that. A number of advisors to the company resigned. And I said, you know what? I've got a choice to face. I've built a multi-billion-dollar company from scratch. Thankfully, the company, it would have been a lot tougher, Don, if it were at a place where, say it were even 4 or 5 years into the journey where the company could not have stood on its own feet without me.
Yeah.
But this was 7 years in. The company was a multi-billion-dollar business. I have a successor lined up. Just the year before, the company had achieved some major milestones that allowed this to stand on its own feet. And I could either stay here and continue to speak my convictions, which, to be clear, my convictions were at minimum the fact that businesses should not be wading into these political issues, which itself back in 2020 was an unacceptable thing to say. Keep in mind, things have moved even a little bit in the last 3-4 years. But back when I'm talking about this in 2020, this was an unacceptable viewpoint to hold. And so, yes, challenging that orthodoxy, saying that in my personal views, I couldn't fathom what BLM was standing for. But regardless of what my personal views were, I don't think that this was a job of a biotech CEO to be weighing into complex issues of race and conflict in America. I ended up having to face a choice. Either I could bend the knee and do what every other tech CEO was doing, most of whom didn't mean it, by the way. It's not like a lot of these people at the top of these food chains are lefties. They
100%.
They're agnostic. They could care less, actually.
Yeah.
And so for me, it would have been the easy thing to do to say, all right, I don't really believe this stuff, but let's just check the box and move on, versus asking the question of what's the point of accumulating all this money and achieving the American dream if you can't even speak your own mind freely. And so I ended up stepping aside from my job as a biotech CEO, put the CFO in the CEO role, and said, I'm going to speak openly about this. And that led me to write Woke Inc. And that led to the next book, led to the next book after that. I started a company, by the way, which you might be familiar with, Don. I don't know. Are you familiar with Strive, actually? Which is the next company I started? Yeah.
I am.
So I started Strive in part. That's what I thought I was going to do. I wasn't going to be an author for the long run. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, but it took a couple of years to locate where my convictions and passions were. And then I thought I landed on my destination, which was driving change through the market. Mm-hmm. And so I started this company called Strive to compete with BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard. They were sort of the invisible hand guiding a lot of companies, including biotech companies and tech companies, to behave the way they are. You'll be familiar with this. I assume your audience will have some familiarity with it as well, of using retirement money. So pension funds, 401k accounts. Probably most of the money of people who are watching us speak right now don't know that their money is indirectly being managed by one of these firms: BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, Invesco, others like them.
Pushing that DEI agenda and all the other nonsense. I mean, yeah.
Exactly. And so I've studied this probably in greater depth than you want to go, but we could go into depth of the real problem isn't that they're necessarily buying shares in the woke companies, but not the non-woke ones. It's that they're buying shares in all of the companies through index funds, which just own the stock market, which is what goes in a retirement fund portfolio or in an investment account. But they vote your shares in corporate America's boardrooms for the DEI policies that result in disastrous outcomes from companies from Coca-Cola to Anheuser-Busch to Boeing. And so what I came up with was an alternative company that would offer the same kinds of index funds, right? So own all the companies, woke or not, doesn't matter.
Yep.
It's an index fund, but vote for the policies that demand that those companies focus exclusively on profit and exclusively on making their products and services for their customers, rather than on these left-wing social agendas. And
because
so
there's no way they're actually acting as fiduciaries. And I mean, it's something I've thought about is why don't more shareholders, even small shareholders at Disney and these other companies, actually sue, knowing that the decisions are not actually maximizing sort of their profitability, their fiduciary responsibility in there. Similar to you did it from a fund level. I've sort of invested on the individual company level where I can help promote and get these companies going as a early guy and Public Square and some of the sponsors that I'll actually invest in these companies myself because I believe in that message. And we talk about voting with our dollars, because if you cut off those funds, when it's one guy going out there politically, hey, they wait them out, they take them out, they spend God knows how much money against them. Even if the policies would be better for the companies, they're still voting for the Democrats and pushing money that way. It's like watching the United Auto Workers Union. No, we want to get electric vehicles, but we're going to have them sent to China with batteries made in China and send your job and your American dream to China and everything. And everyone's like, yay, we get to pay dues to end our existence. And it makes no sense to me. And yet it goes on daily.
So let's just double click into this then, because I think that this actually is worth delving into the plumbing of this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the funny thing is about running for office, I mean, the questions you'll get. So then people will say, oh, well, but you started Strive, and Strive owns shares in some of those woke companies. Yep. Is that, Vivek, really, and the things you'll hear in a campaign, man.
Oh, trust me.
It's that's a whole separate, we could have this discussion, and people should be skeptical, but people who have the right emotions need to understand how they're actually being duped to understand what the heck is going on. So while it's cool to have, new companies in the new economy, most of the largest companies in the world are all behaving in the same way. And you need to actually have market exposure to those companies. Yeah. But the problem is the way that your own shares are voted, right? So when you're saying vote with your dollars, it's one thing to shop as a customer of, I don't know, Under Armour over Nike or something. It's another, literally all of the investment fund money you have invested in your pension fund or your 401k account. Literally, you get to vote as a shareholder for policies. Do you want to vote for Chevron to adopt a Scope 3 emissions plan? I don't think so. You want Chevron to vote for maximizing profit. Yeah. Do you want Apple to vote for racial equity audits? And these are specific examples at specific companies where Apple adopted racial equity audits. It's because BlackRock and State Street and a bunch of asset managers voted for it. No, you don't want that, because then you get suboptimal products and suboptimal engineers. Or do you actually want them to focus on what maximizes value? And so the irony, Don, is the reason these companies are all behaving that way is historically the wisdom used to be they're violating their fiduciary duty to shareholders. And so to your question, wouldn't you just bring a fiduciary suit against one of these companies? Here's what throws a wrench in that. Most of the so-called shareholders of each of these companies are firms like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, Invesco, and others. Yeah. And the so-called shareholders are saying, no, this is exactly what we want you to be doing, which throws a wrench in the Milton Friedman logic to say that these CEOs are violating their fiduciary duty to the shareholders. The shareholders, in air quotes, are saying that's exactly what they want these companies to be doing. But the problem is the so-called shareholders are not the actual shareholders. Correct. These are just pass-through vehicles for the everyday citizens who give their money to a wealth manager who then gives it to buy into a fund. That fund's managed by BlackRock that then buys shares in the company like Apple that then vote for those policies. And so I spent, I was a CEO who raised external capital as a biotech company. I wrote books about this. So going deep into the root cause, decided to start a firm called Strive that then competes directly against BlackRock by offering the same kinds of investment products, but by voting for pro-profit policies in the boardroom. Then the question, though, begs the question of why is BlackRock doing this, right? So why is it in BlackRock's interest to vote for these environmental and social agendas in Apple's or Chevron's boardroom? And the answer then comes back to government, because BlackRock, most of their money that they manage is actually handed to them not by individual clients directly, but by government actors, particularly state pension funds, like CalPERS or like the state of New York.
The teachers unions, this. So they're a bunch of leftists. So they're okay suboptimally investing your retirement funds. But, with their inflation and all of this stuff, what you think you can be able to afford in time will not be there. It's why Nikki Haley's flip-flopping so much on the retirement age, because they realize that's not going to be there if these policies continue, because you are not going to get the returns that you'd otherwise be able to get if people were just acting as rational actors.
That's right. And so it's not the invisible hand of the market, it's the invisible fist of government that was guiding this, which all roads lead back to, I think, taking on the mother of all bureaucracies, which is the bureaucracy in the deep state and the federal government. And so anyway, it was that journey that led me. And I took on Big Pharma. That was my biotech company. It was actually about developing drugs that pharma refused to develop. Why? Because pharma behaves in the shadow of the FDA, which they've captured. In my entire business career, all roads lead back to the mother of all bureaucracies in the deep state. And the correct answer, I think, is I don't even see the world through Democrats versus Republicans. It's not really, I think, a useful term when you got Republicans like Nikki Haley or others within a Republican Party. Why does this label
Republicans
mean
in big old air quotes? Yeah.
Right, exactly. So to me, the real dividing line is you got the permanent state versus the everyday citizen. You've got the people who love the United States of America and our founding ideals, and a fringe minority who hates this country and what we stand for, or to put it in broader terms, the Great Reset and the Great Uprising. Yeah. That's the dividing line. It's not black versus white or red versus blue. A lot of that is an optical illusion. The real divide is the managerial class versus the everyday citizen. And I have, for my career and for my business career, and I think taken that into what my campaign represented, a effectively war on that administrative state, a war on the managerial class, a war on the permanent state. That's what I wanted to do. If I saw this all the way through and was elected as the next president, the top of my agenda was not to reform. And I think that people get deluded by the idea that reform of this bureaucracy is possible, but the actual mission of shutting it down. And so I aimed to run the campaign in the same way. A lot of the usual political consultant nonsense. We were draining the swamp in some ways at every step of running this campaign, draining the swamp in the media establishment. But if you actually want to go in there and get that job done, it's going to require somebody to go into the three-letter agencies in Washington, D.C. and not reforming them, but actually quite literally shutting them down. And I have devoted, I was a lawyer by background as well. I tend to do a lot of different things. I have a number of different interests. I could tell you, go further back in my past. But anyway, I think it's going to take a unique combination of legal knowledge to contend with, I think, a lot of the mumbo jumbo around civil service protections or otherwise that they threw at your father and otherwise that we're going to have to cut through to get that job done. But I do think that if we drain that bureaucracy, actually shut that bureaucracy, the mother of all bureaucracies, down, that has a domino effect, effectively, that restores integrity back into the capital markets. It effectively takes the legs out from underneath the ESG movement, takes the legs out from underneath the corruption in big pharma and elsewhere. That's downstream of what I see as the ultimate head of the snake, which is the deep state and the federal government.
Well, you've talked about that. I mean, you sort of talk, an American Renaissance, an American revival. Yeah, I think you said it actually best the other night. When you were on the stage with my father. This is a 1776 moment.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of truth to that, because it's gotten so ridiculous that even those who are agnostic, even those who haven't been paying attention traditionally, they're now paying attention. If a guy like me, the son of a billionaire, can go into, a McDonald's with his kids and be like, damn, like have sticker shock at the price, or the grocery store, like I'm not supposed to notice. If I notice, and I notice a lot of people must be getting absolutely crushed.
Yeah, I think now the effect of that is literally not just the theoretical effect of people having their citizen and their civic voice no longer being heard, which is bad enough, but now it's actually affecting their pocketbook as well. Yeah. And so I think that's a dangerous combination of circumstances. The positive side of that is, if you do imagine that we're in a 1776 moment, what a special time that was to be alive in the spring of 1776, right? I think there's a lot of opportunity to revive a sense of idealism when they weren't victimized by King George. They could have chosen to be victims and angry about it, as opposed to say, we're actually going to do something about it. And so that's part of what I've been trying to do in this campaign, or what was this campaign, I should say, is to revive that founding culture and spirit of exploration. Yeah. I mean, think about Thomas Jefferson. He was 33 when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. And he literally, I'm sitting in a swivel chair talking to you now, Don. Thomas Jefferson invented the swivel chair.
Really? And now a 33-year-old is still trying to figure out their pronouns. And
yeah, exactly.
Exactly. How we have fallen. It's like, it's hard to believe we've come. It's 300 years and we're like way behind. In
this 250 years, but let's just take a positive minute and think about what that involves, reviving that spirit. It wasn't just Thomas Jefferson. Benjamin Franklin invented the Franklin stove, a lightning rod on top of the home, a remedy to the common cold, the bifocal spectacle. This is also one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Yeah. Robert Livingston, I don't know who the ambassador to France was under Trump 1 administration, but not to throw whoever that was under the bus, but Robert Livingston was an ambassador to France, and he was inventing one of the components to the steamship that eventually ended up being one of the great inventions of a century. while also being one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. These were the types of people who were our founding fathers, right?
Well, but now they're being erased as well because
of course, they were slave
Jefferson
owners.
had slaves. I mean, we must end all of that. It started off, hey, well, that's a Confederate general, so we got to delete that. But you knew it was never going to end there because it never ends there. And that's what people fail to recognize. You try to capitulate a little bit. You mentioned earlier sort of the corporate donations to BLM and the black squares. Like some of the literally most basic, boring, I saw a lot of it, white women that if their kids showed up with something, a minority or an African-American home, they'd be going back to their friends like, oh my God, I can't believe, they're posting BLM black squares. I'm like, listen, like everyone knows you're full of shit. Like, stop. And yet they did it because the social pressure to not do it was, or the social credit for doing it. Either way, whichever way you want to look at it, was either beneficial or not to them. For their very basic circles.
The irony on that, Don, is back in our founding era, John Adams actually was not a slaveholder. He was somebody who was a principled abolitionist. He was the second president of the United States. People don't talk about it very much. Mm-hmm. But the people who are today putting their little black square on their Instagram account and have a nice little BLM fist or whatever, and the yard signs that read how they're against racism, are like the equivalent of the people back then who would have been unthinking slaveholders at the time, actually. They would not have been the John Adams figures of their day. Yeah. They would have just been the people conforming to the culture of their time. And so, to me, one of my missions in life is to challenge people and to wake people up out of the orthodoxies they've been lulled into. I think most people innately have both in them a lion and a sheep. No one is 100% one of those things. But I think right now we live in a moment in our culture, and I think we have for a good part of the last decade, where the sheep inside most of us has actually been what's guided the way we've behaved. We become a nation of sheep. And a nation of sheep is what breeds a government of wolves. And so in the way I'm running my businesses or my campaign or anything else, it's to wake up that inner animal spirit that I think right now has been domesticated and tamed into submission. But when I say it's a 1776 moment, yes, I want to revive the ideals of the Constitution. And yes, I think that we're going to have to step up and actually each do our part to revive those ideals. But part of that's awakening the guy who invented the swivel chair or the lightning rod or the steamship, while also signing a Declaration of Independence from a monarch who said that, you know what, I know what's best for you, and you guys can't be trusted to self-govern, to tell King George or some person in the back of a three-letter government agency or Larry Fink or whoever else, thank you very much for your benevolence, but we don't need that because we're going to self-govern, and we the people determine how we're going to fight racial injustice or climate change or whatever else, because that's what the United States of America was founded on. That's why I think we live in an American revolutionary moment. I don't think we have to fight the revolution this time. If we get it right at the ballot box, that's actually the best way to do this. But it's reviving those 1776 ideals. That's the kind of moment we live in today, not some type of red versus blue beat Biden agenda. I don't spend a lot of time bashing Biden.
But I also saw a lot of people fold. During COVID was an awakening moment. A lot of people that I thought were definitely at least leaning towards wolf end up just being sheep, and the ridiculous mask stuff and the jabs, and like I was a little shocked. And you see it around the world. You see what happened in Canada with the truckers and the shutting that down, and in the UK you go to jail for misgendering someone for 2 years. And I mean, I'm saying, whoa, like I thought these guys were kind of like us in terms of freedom, and I don't want to say democracy because they're all a little different, but generally speaking, big D, little d, the terms of lowercase d democracy. They were there, and you realize they're basically totalitarian governments at this point. And I thought they were just like us, and you see where we're going, and I'm very worried about that direction if we don't sort of urge more people to actually unleash their inner wolf.
Yes, absolutely, and this is transnational right now. So I think forget about black versus white. Even just take off the Republican versus Democrat filter. I don't think the Republican label means very much right now. Take that off. And then even beyond national boundaries. I mean, what happened with Canada with the truckers? What's going on in Argentina with Javier Milei coming to power? Yeah. What's going on even in places like Italy with Giorgia Meloni? This is a transnational great uprising against the vision of the Great Reset, right? The Great Reset basically says, it's the old world European vision, which says, you had the World Economic Forum in Davos just playing out in the last week or so, right? Yeah. That old world vision is rearing its head again that says the people cannot be trusted to self-govern. They'll ruin themselves, right? Modern version of that is climate change. The people can't be trusted because they won't have their own lives to potentially live for themselves. We can't trust them to do that. Out of our benevolence, we the autocrats, the monarchs, the autocrats have to decide what's best for the people at large. That's what 1776 was about, to say, for better or worse, we say no to King George's vision and we say yes here. That's what the World Economic Forum, or the modern vision of the ESG industrial complex, is all about, is to say that it's a fundamental skepticism of citizens to govern themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's the moment we live in right now. And I think there's a lot of that skepticism even within the Republican Party itself, Don. I mean, that's what Nikki Haley means. Yeah. And I don't mean to make this partisan I know there's the New Hampshire primary, and I'm not hitting her just for that reason. I'm hitting her because of what she represents.
Well, she wants everyone on social media to be registered, so that you know.
Exactly.
So that, if they don't like what they say, they can shut you down. I'm sure she'd be all for. Listen, I know we spoke, and you spoke to my father about a central bank digital currency, and what you just think of the trucker strike in Canada. If the banks that shut them down, if the government could literally go into whatever change they had in their pockets or on their phones and just be like, you're cut off. I mean, that would be a disaster. So it was also, we spoke, and I know you spoke with my father about it. And the next day he's like, he's right. We're never going to let that happen, because we are about power to the people, letting them make their own decisions, good, bad, or indifferent. Hey, plenty of people make a lot of bad decisions, but it's their decision to make.
But it's their decision to make. And that's the beauty of it. And I also want to take a minute to actually recognize your father on that. People, I don't think that, in my interactions with him, certainly, you know him a lot better than I do, but I think he's broadly misunderstood by the public, largely because of the media portrayals of it. Yeah. What I saw in that conversation we had backstage before he and I went on there was somebody who was curious, actually. Yeah. Tell me more about what this is. And it's not somebody's, a lot of people might act like they're the ones to actually know everything on day one. Yeah. He didn't pretend to me that he didn't know. He didn't know what that topic was. He had the intellectual curiosity to get to the bottom of it. I know a lot of other politicians who, because they've heard the term, would pretend they know the first thing about it when they don't. Yeah. Here was the opposite. Actually, it was a mark of a kind of humility that I respect, actually. And so the fact that in a brief conversation, get to the bottom of it, understand what's wrong with it, take the day, and then the next day is able to actually take a principled stand, I think is actually encouraging. And if more people, I think, saw that side of Donald Trump, I think that he would actually be far more persuasive to a lot of people who are just swallowing what they're force-fed from the media. Yeah. But regardless, I think it's going to take leaders like that to be able to cut through what's otherwise coming from this monarchical agenda. And they find their puppets in the Democrat Party, but they find their puppets within the Republican Party to advance their agenda too. And Nikki Haley is just the latest vehicle that they found to advance that monarchical agenda.
Yeah, and speaking of that, sort of agenda, because again, we both sort of come from. You're more corporate America. We were family business, but at a pretty large scale. I talk a lot about the failures of the Biden economy and the Democrat policy and the insanity, but it's not just inflation and this. It's also sort of this bloated managerial consultant class.
Totally.
The deep structural flaws with how we're organizing our business. And, if you hire Pete Buttigieg for $100,000, he'll tell you to offshore all of your jobs to China and you can save 2 cents. In my opinion, it's leading to really a lack of meaning and purpose in our workforce. The DEI is certainly a part of the issue, and you were way ahead of the curve on that one. But can you talk about what are the other sort of major red flags you see? You mentioned it as it related to sort of big pharma and going through the FDA. Yep. Is there a cure for cancer that we're just never going to see because someone's paying the FDA to shut it down because, we spent a lot of money on this other thing. We're going to make sure we get our investment. Ivermectin clearly doesn't work, even though it worked, once you actually go through the studies because, if it really works and we have a cheap cure, no one's going to make billions and they're not going to get on the board of Pfizer or, big pharma once they get out of their governmental role. And that's the problem. Whether it's big military or big pharma, there's always a role later on a board of some company making stupid money for doing nothing if you give them what they want when you're in the position of power to do so.
So I'll offer a couple simple points. This is why I say there's not Republican versus Democrat on this. I don't think you should be able to join the board of a company if you have been a regulator of that company. I don't think that's complicated, and yet it's happening regularly, on the regular, Republican and Democrat alike. I don't think you should be allowed to trade individual stocks if you're in Congress or regulating a particular industry or has setting policy.
Nancy Pelosi is not that good an investor that she can outperform the greatest geniuses of Wall Street every year by magic. Like it doesn't happen that way.
I can tell you, my first 7 years of my job out of college was at a hedge fund. I worked with some of the smartest people I have met. I will tell you, I've met most of the people in Congress. They would do themselves a favor not to be trading individual stocks unless they're actually utilizing the public's information to advantage themselves, which is exactly what's happening today. But I think basic anti-corruption measures make absolute sense in the world. As it relates to the FDA, I'm a medical choice absolutist. If you want to take something, just because the FDA has not approved it, as long as you're fully informed and have informed consent, you should be allowed to take a potential life-saving therapy on the basis of what you know about that rather than the FDA.
Well, my father did that with Right to Try, right? I mean, it seems so obvious. Like, you're about to drop dead in 7 minutes. We have something that seems promising, but we're not going to let you take it because the FDA. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, the amount of lives it saved and the amount of research it moved forward.
It's funny. So your father was right about Right to Try. I just want to kind of zoom in here a layer deeper, just because I was in the industry, so you sort of see what happens. Here's the deal with the FDA. All right, so they hated the fact, they completely detested the fact that Right to Try became a thing. Right, so that's where you get a President Trump. He has a right vision, tries to get this passed into the law, and there's Right to Try. There's effectively an unspoken rule in the industry that that if you as a company made your therapy available through Right to Try, which sidestepped the FDA, and I haven't talked about this before, but this is actually a really classic example of the managerial class. The FDA will despise you as a company for it, so much so that any other drug that you're pushing through the FDA, they're going to blackball you. And so there's an old expression in the pharmaceutical industry. It goes, FDA never forgets, right? So the idea of actually utilizing Right to Try is totally unthinkable, even though that's the law of the land, because we, the people, said that's what we wanted, voted for president, voted for congressman who passed that. Doesn't matter, because the fourth branch, the FDA, has decided that if a company is actually using Right to Try, they're going to actually bring the hammer down on you on anything else you're trying to get through that FDA, such that answers the mystery, Don, of why. So people criticize your father for passing that, saying that the companies know that their products actually aren't going to be safe for people to use. And so this whole Right to Try thing was much ado about nothing. And they criticized the people who pushed it. The reality actually belies that. I talk about this. I have a whole chapter in my first book in Woke Inc. It's called The Rise of the Managerial Class, and kind of explains what's going on. The jujitsu move here is the FDA, the rank and file, wanted to make a fool of the elected representatives, including the President of the United States, by showing them that, see, we told you companies were better off not actually making their drugs available. But through the back door, here's the part that people didn't know, they're effectively telling companies that if they do use Right to Try, they're going to make your life hell. Everybody in the industry knew it. So nobody in the industry said, okay, there's patients who are potentially dying or suffering from not having access to the drug, but I know that I'm not going to get my other drugs through the FDA if I avail myself of this law that Trump passed, because these people at the FDA want to actually make Trump look foolish for trying to pass it and actually penalize companies. So that's the whole game, which comes back to, you have to shut it down. Reform of these agencies don't work. Putting Betsy DeVos or whoever else, on well-intentioned they might be, on top of the Department of Education, or pick your favorite bureaucrat on top of the FDA, or on top of the IRS, or on top of the ATF, or the FBI, or the CDC, or the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It does not work. Reform is impossible. Yeah. The correct answer is you have to actually shut it down. And they told your father, understandably, things like, oh, you can't shut these things down because these employees enjoy civil service protections. You familiar with this issue? No,
I am.
Yes or no? Not really.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. You are. I couldn't hear you. Sorry. So the reality is, if you get into the law, I mean, these people are snakes, right? Those civil service protections only protect against individual employee firings, right? To say that you couldn't fire that person at the FDA because you disagree with them on gun control. I don't know, I'm making that up. That's what the law says you can't do. However, it does not protect against mass indiscriminate firings. And mass firings are absolutely what we need to bring to that DC bureaucracy. So the top plank of my presidential platform was a 75% mass headcount reduction across the federal bureaucracy purposefully, indiscriminately. Not that you're going to get the bad ones out. You can bring the chisel out after you get the first 75% out. But 75% mass firing across the board. It's kind of like what Elon did to Twitter. The darn thing will work better the next day if you actually clean house. Well, about 25% of the people, actually, it's arguably less than that, but generously, 25% of the people are all you need there in the first place. That is how you drain the swamp. Yeah. Now, are they going to sue us? Yes, they will. But your father actually did a good job excellent job with the Supreme Court justices. 6 out of the 9 Supreme Court justices agree with everything that I'm telling you. That's what a president actually can do.
Yeah.
That's what it's actually going to take. So even passing good laws like right to try, and there's the equivalent in the energy sector and the EPA. I mean, every one of these agencies is the same old story.
Yeah.
The good laws alone aren't going to change it if that rot still survives. And so that's what I'm passionate about. And
it reminds me sort of Fauci, right? I always use the example of Fauci. He was never the best doctor. Absolutely. He probably wasn't even a journeyman doctor, but he was a better bureaucrat. So anyone who stood in his way, he'd steamroll them, he'd screw them over, they'd make sure they'd never work again. And when you saw COVID, it's like, of course, the Wuhan virus came from the lab in Wuhan that studies the exact virus in question, not from 7 feet outside of the lab, as they tried to tell you. But if you were a doctor and you said, like, of course the Wuhan lab leak theory is the most plausible.
You were censored.
You were cut off from funding. You were this. So you could speak the truth, but you'd never work again. You lost that tenure that you had. And he was maniacal enough that he would exercise that kind of power, sort of like you're saying with the FDA and right to try.
But it's not just Fauci, and it's not just, it's the 100 people underneath him, right? So it is the machine. And so this is where I have a different opinion from most Republicans. I might have a different opinion than your father on this one too. You can't do it by just firing Christopher Wray at the FBI.
Or 100% right. Yeah.
You have to break the apparatus. You have to shut it down. It's the only option. Now, there's always 2 risks, right? Do you not cut enough fat, in which case, you haven't cut enough, or do you cut too much that you take the risk of cutting muscle? Mm-hmm. I would take that risk over the risk of not cutting enough. Because if you have an 8-headed hydra and you cut off one of the heads, it grows right back. You have to gut it at its core. And absent that, no amount of reform is going to actually make that difference. And so that's why I was so passionate, animated, even running in a race against a man who I immensely admire, which I think I made abundantly clear over the course of the race. If you were watching, I respected Donald Trump immensely for his contributions to this country. I think it takes a businessman. He did something that nobody had ever else done. Yeah. The expression I used in the campaign trail was he rolled that log over and we saw what crawled out of that swamp.
100%.
Which I respected. But the contrast I was drawing from your father is, I want to come in and bring the pesticide now, right? There's a role for the guy to expose it.
I like that role. You have, listen, it's clear you've done the research. You understand where these things are. You understand who those things are. And you're right. It's not just Ray. I used to do the, often I'd be like, listen, we make a distinction between the door kickers and the bureaucrats at the top at the FBI. But like now I'm like, well, now you're arresting innocent people. You're breaking down their doors with machine guns. Like, when do you guys say enough is enough? Like, I've given you the hall pass for I'm just doing my job. But when you're doing your job, knowingly infringing on rights, when you're entrapping, some meth head to try to pretend there was a plot to assassinate and kidnap the governor of Michigan, like, it's all a lie. Like, when are you culpable? When do you lose the hall pass I gave you for you just doing your job, because you're no longer just doing your job?
So the next time I have a conversation with your father again, because I've been impressed by how receptive he has actually been to reasoned analysis and argument, I'm going to actually talk to him about the FBI, because, I know there was, he's talking about the new building. What are they going to do? Let's actually just get to the math of this. There's 35,000 employees at the FBI. Okay. 20,000 of them are the back office bureaucrats in the J. Edgar Hoover building and the other back office functions throughout the federal government. That's where the rot comes from. So firing Christopher Wray and giving him a new building, that's not going to get the job done. We have to shut it down. The 15,000 people who are the frontline cops, most of them are just following directives. Yeah. Don, I'd say let's move them to the U.S. Marshals or to the DEA, flawed as the DEA is, or to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network at the U.S. Treasury that goes after the SBFs of the world. So just take the line soldiers, and even if you move them to some of the agencies that have been corrupted, but for the J. Edgar Hoover building at the FBI, the institution itself, what I called the failed Bureau of Investigation, the 20,000 back office bureaucrats at the FBI, we have to be willing to do the hard thing. and actually shut it down. Will they try to blackball you? I mean, I wouldn't put it past these people anymore. I mean, we'll leave it at that. But they will stop at nothing, let's just say, to sort of engineer the artificial, kind of like what I told you about the FDA, right? They effectively threaten the companies through the back door to say, dare you use this right to try law that Donald Trump passed? Yeah. We're going to blackball you on everything else. The FBI version of that is probably far more insidious.
Yeah, well, you saw what they did to the whistleblowers, right? The whistleblowers, yes, exactly. If it was against Trump, backlash. That person was beyond reproach. How dare you, even if it's totally biased, even if it was ridiculous, even if it was proven true, it didn't matter. If you were a whistleblower against their insanity, you know, again, whether it was the Gretchen Whitmer plot, I mean, the January 6th pipe bomb, which magically was discovered by a plainclothes Capitol police officer.
Two of them.
That
no
for the
one,
DNC
no one
and the RNC. To check.
Unbelievable.
It was almost like if they didn't get what they wanted out of January 6th, then they had another avenue that they could pursue to create the insurrection argument. You know, we can't release the videos because there's 200 plus FBI agents in the, quote, first unarmed insurrection in the history of the world. We can't release it because we'd give up our officers. Like, so they were there, they were in the room, and they didn't do anything to stop it? Like, what's going on here? And what did you make of the whole pipe bomb case? Because that one's crazy to me.
And Kamala was there the morning of at the DNC headquarters, which is actually the funniest and most bizarre piece of that twist, that security didn't get it, but later on they did it at the right time. So that's where that shoe is going to drop, I believe, as the details of the pipe bomb investigation come out. But I'm going to make a broader point here. Down, we've got to level up, man. And I think that as a movement, with the rigor that we're actually able to cut through the BS that they push our way, that was my purpose in this race. And I think that for our movement, we cannot just stop at sort of throwing our hands up in the air and just using the general expressions we've used. Mm-hmm. We have to get and level up with respect to the level of detail and rigor. Yep. I'm talking about the plan for shutting down the FBI. That's one example of it, or the FDA, or thinking about actually cutting through the specifics of which video footage was or was not released to understand that the same person, Stephen D'Antonio, who ran the Detroit field office of the FBI, which actually started with a plot to storm the Capitol in Michigan that became the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot, pointing to the actual jury acquittals of multiple of those defendants on the ground of entrapment. That Detroit field office head was the very person who was then promoted by Christopher Wray to become the DC field office head months before January 6, 2021. Yep. But what I want to ask of our movement, and I'm going to do my part to do it, is we have to level up with the rigor that we're actually bringing to the table, or else we're going to be on the losing side of this. Can't just pass the laws, think we accomplished something, replace a figurehead on top, and call it a day. Yeah. We have to be willing to go in and gut that the very existence of that bureaucracy on legally rigorous footing at every step of the way, to say that, if you're going to sue us, that's fine. We're going to take it to the Supreme Court and win. That's what it's going to take to drive change in this country. And that's what, frankly, motivated me in this. I'm speaking super candidly, but I felt like that level of rigor was missing. And our movement, we owe it to this movement to take this further. And so now I'm all in, and I'm going to help Donald Trump. I mean, people spoke loud and clear. This, ultimately, the beauty of our system is it's up to the people. Yeah. And so the people have spoken loud and clear. I'm all in to make sure that he's as successful as he can be. But I think that we have to do it by leveling up our own movement with respect to the rigor of going about it this time around. Because the rot runs far deeper than just even the Faucis or the Christopher Wrays.
Well, I don't know if the position exists, man, but we may have to create that position for you, because you're right. You do need that. You also need.
I mean, I don't need any particular position myself. If there's better people to do this, that's great.
But you need a team.
We have to eradicate.
You need a team.
Someone
of people,
needs to bring
right?
the pesticide. Actually, is what we actually need.
Yeah.
So that's what we need in this in our movement.
We also need the resolve that, unfortunately, is so lacking, in the Republican Party so much. The Republicans, it's a pretty easy existence in D.C. to be a Republican, shockingly, if you just roll over.
Doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
30% of the time. You can be 75% Republican and tell your people at home who voted for you to be a conservative, what they want to hear there. But if you go to D.C. and you give up on the big ones, Langford over in Oklahoma, let's just open up the borders and basically pass a bill that gives them amnesty. It's like, wait, the people of Oklahoma certainly don't want that. Real conservatives don't want that, but he's too afraid to go up against the left. So he will give Chuck Schumer whatever they want. And I'd love to actually hear, your opinion, on the borders, because, like me, you're the son of immigrants. I know my mother was an immigrant, and some of the most patriotic people I know are actually immigrants who did it the right way. But the left, they love to frame sort of the open borders thing. It's compassion. But the reality is there's nothing compassionate about ceding your sovereignty, undermining your own citizens, but also creating an incentive structure for people to travel thousands of miles with no means, being trafficked by coyotes, drug traffickers. I mean, talk about the importance of patriotism and the virtue of embracing border security, and the nation state, as well as the humanitarian crisis that we're causing under the guise of being nice, because it's total nonsense.
I mean, a nation without borders is not a nation. Let's just sort of accept that basic truth. You want to address this border crisis? I'm just going to get to the punchline. Let me work south to north, okay? Mm-hmm. Stop any federal funding for Central America or Mexico, period, and instead require every one of those countries, right, all the way from Venezuela to the northern border of Texas, to rebuild their own border barricades, including across what's called the Darien Pass, the jungle region that people didn't used to pass through. Keep in mind that 80% of the people coming into our country from Mexico, over 80% of them did not start in Mexico. Yeah. So if every one of those countries is saying we're done, cut off the foreign aid tomorrow, and require that they build their own border barricades from Honduras, Nicaragua, Panama, every one of those countries all the way up, then you stop the flow. Now you come to our own southern border. Of course, completion of the wall is necessary. Even Biden agrees with that now. But that's not enough. They're building cartel-financed tunnels underneath that wall. There's certain areas that cannot be walled. Yeah. The right answer ends up being, I believe, move our own military to the southern border. Yeah. And where's our military? We got 40,000 troops sitting in places like Germany, which does not even pay 2% of its own GDP on its own military expenditures.
Yeah. Japan.
Germany is, I mean, you got Germany, Japan are two of the biggest places, but Germany is a NATO ally bound to spend 2% of its own GDP and still doesn't do it to this day, laughing at us at every step of the way, free riding. So a lot of those troops, we just move them to our own southern border, complete the border wall, end the foreign aid to Central America, require each of them to build their border barricades. We've got our border sealed. I mean, we got that problem solved. I'd actually go one step further preemptively, and I'd move a good part of our military to protect our northern border too. Keep in mind, our northern border has seen more illegal border crossings last year than the last 12 years combined. But the combination of those two things send a signal to the rest of the world, and half of this is the signal that we send, that we're not open for business anymore to this type of illegal mass migration. Now you bring it back home. Let's do the best border policies of all. Cease any dime of federal funding to a sanctuary city. We're done creating the incentives to be here illegally. And then on day one, and I can talk to you about why the president can do this, Don. I think they, may have not more of that mythology from the deep state that they might have given to your father. End birthright citizenship for the kids of illegal migrants. Mm-hmm. The president does not need anybody's permission to do this because the 14th Amendment already says so. I can tell you why. And then I would start the process of mass deportations. Anybody who's in this country illegally. I mean, I love the beauty of legal immigrants who are willing to make contributions to this country if they come the right way and do it, like your mother and my parents. But anybody who's in this country illegally has to be returned to their country of origin, period. Again, things that they tell people in the last administration is, there's only 6,000 ICE agents. How are we possibly going to remove a bunch of people who are here illegally by the millions? The answer is there's a section in the law that allows you to do it. It's called 287G. It allows you to serve local law enforcement, to use local law enforcement to serve ICE's warrants. You then have 1 million local law enforcement. This ends up being a doable task, but it takes, I think, someone with the spine and the knowledge of the law to see that through, to deliver that mass removal. And then this birthright citizenship point I just want to make, because I think this is super important for people to understand. You're familiar with the issue of birthright citizenship, of course, that if you're born here, automatically conferred citizenship. They say that that's what the Constitution says. Here's my suggestion. Read the Constitution. The opening words of the 14th Amendment are clear. It says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, those are the magic words, are citizens. Well, what do those words mean? If you're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, you don't enjoy birthright citizenship. Yep. So the kid of a Mexican diplomat, take that example. A kid of a Mexican diplomat is here. He's here legally, right? The Mexican diplomat is allowed to be in this country. If he has a kid in the United States, does that kid enjoy birthright citizenship The answer to that is no. And there's not a judge or a legal scholar in this country who would disagree with me on that. Well, if the kid of a Mexican diplomat who's here legally does not enjoy birthright citizenship, then neither does the kid of a Mexican or Venezuelan illegal migrant who's here enjoy birthright citizenship either. Which means the next president who swears an oath to the Constitution, and that's going to be your father if we get our jobs and get our ducks in a row and do this right, understands that, then you don't need a constitutional amendment to say that that day going forward, January 20th, 2025 going forward, nobody born in this country of illegals will enjoy citizenship, period. That's it. And the executive branch of the government signals through law enforcement and otherwise, all of the privileges and immunities of citizenship do not apply to anybody whose kid is here illegally. That has eliminated a mass part of the incentive. If you've also eliminated federal funding for sanctuary cities, you've eliminated the incentives to be here. You've got the military on the border, completed the wall, and ended federal funding for the other countries that haven't built their own border barricades. We got this problem solved, right?
Yeah.
And everything I told you, did I talk about passing a bill through Congress? No, I didn't, because existing laws already allow for it. And 287G already allows us to use local law enforcement, of whom we have 1 million, to go after the 8 million who are here illegally. It comes back down to that deep state that has duped the president of the United States to say that, no. Here's what the law and the Constitution say. Thank you very much. We're clearing house for the 75% who are the rot that live there and the remaining 25% to get that job done. All we need to do is use the executive branch to get that job done. And I think that we could actually, in the first 6 months, revive this country. Then that parts the seas in Congress to say, okay, you guys see the country's actually on track to being normalized from a border crisis to an economy that's growing again. We're rescinding a lot of those unconstitutional regulations. That grows the economy. Great. Now let's talk about what we want to get done through Congress. I think that's how it's got to be done this time around. And I think that the sad part about this is the bar has been set so low that we could score a bunch of big wins very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
That, you could turn this country around in 6 months, and then that gets Congress back in line to pass the legislative agenda, which I think should come after the executive agenda that we start with. And I think that sometimes starting with the legislative agenda first slows things down versus saying, what can we get done through the executive branch right now, score some big wins for the country, and then use that as a tailwind to drive the legislative agenda after. I think that's the way things need to go.
Yeah, and I think we tried doing a lot of that in the first time with executive orders that actually were effective. They worked very well, but then you have Congress trying to undermine you at all costs. So that a big part of this is, again, no different than the institutions. You can't just cut off the head of the snake. You got to take it back down further.
Deep.
We have the same thing in Congress, because even we had the House, we had the Senate, we had the presidency. But if you have weak congressmen that are more worried about being invited to the cool person holiday party and Christmas party in Washington, D.C., than they are delivering for their constituency or the beliefs of their party or their commander in chief, that rot applies across the board. It's not just within the institutions. Exactly.
And so I think you just go one by one. I think that a lot of what I'm talking about, they're not there's executive orders that could be substitutes for policy, but the kind of executive actions I'm talking about are, if you're shutting down massive numbers of agencies, then Congress has to act to bring them back. The executive, in many cases, can shut them down, but to bring them back, the next president can't just bring it back with the stroke of a pen. And so that's the beauty of taking more of the shutdown approach. And so anyway, I think, as you can tell, I'm very biased towards that. I think we need to bring Javier Milei on steroids to the United States of America. And, I think that's what it's going to take to actually get this job done. And there's going to be all kinds of resistance. No doubt about it. But certainly, I think the next time, and maybe you'll have the conversation sooner than I do, and all the better if you do.
Well, I think we all have a lot of conversations. I think we believe the same things, and and so does he, frankly. And I think he now sees.
I know he does.
He sees that. He sees the attacks. He sees the attacks on him, but the regular people of America, and how the full force and effect of our federal government has been weaponized. Really against 50% of the people, or at least certainly more so against the ones that are vocal. But I want to talk about that, because there is a lack of justice, it seems, these days, and maybe our most important virtue within our institutions is justice itself. Right? Without it, citizens lose complete faith in the integrity in government. And by the way, I think some of it's very intentional for government. They want to demoralize you. They want you to think your vote doesn't matter. They want you to sit at home and they'll tell you what's better for you. They're full of it. They've proven themselves to be wrong, but they've also proven themselves, in my mind, to be evil. What's in your vision the path to restoring credibility within the justice system?
Yeah, so I think that it starts with a powerful move that's in the president's hands on day one, which is a series of, like, I think it's going to be a very long list of pardons. Mm-hmm. To say that anybody who was incorrectly prosecuted or persecuted because of their own political beliefs, just as it was wrong in this country, it's happened because of skin color, Don. 160 years ago, that was the case, and it was wrong then. Yeah. Well, just as somebody should not be held to a different standard of the rule of law because of their skin color a century and a half ago, they shouldn't be held to a different standard of the rule of law because of their political belief either. And so if somebody else would not have been persecuted under the same circumstances, and we know that with hard evidence that they weren't, that puts somebody eligible for pardon. Take Douglas Mackey. Yep. Douglas Mackey and Christina Wong, she's a comedian, literally did the same thing in reverse, wasn't prosecuted but celebrated as a comedian. That's a classic case for a pardon on the grounds of political injustice, of a peaceful January 6th protester versus BLM or Antifa that was treated a different way in that same year of 2020. And I think it's going to take for restoring justice. As you know, I've been a big advocate of this. I was an advocate of this with your father the other night, and I'm hopeful to see this translate. I think if he does this in New Hampshire, I think the people in New Hampshire would rally behind him, and I think it's the right decision to give a pardon to Julian Assange.
I agree with you 100%. And honestly, 7 or 8 years ago, I wouldn't have. Before I saw what the government will do, because I know what they tried to doing to me, and certainly see what they're trying to do to my father. And there was a time I was like, no, he's a traitor. He gave up secret. And now I'm realizing, no. Like, our government has been lying to us. We have intelligence people that lied before Congress. They not only do they not face any ramifications, they get contributing jobs at CNN to continue to lie to the American people.
Absolutely. They don't which is the fifth branch of government, really.
They don't lose their intelligence access. I'm looking at the 51 people in the intelligence community. They don't lose their top secret clearance for lying to the American public that the Hunter Biden laptop wasn't real.
They get a promotion. They get a promotion and added consulting gigs. So, and even on the Julian Assange thing, I mean, again, I want to be really rigorous about this, because the facts of it, I think, are worth noting. He was the journalist who published the documents that were leaked to him by the government. That's literally how Washington, D.C. works. I mean, it's like the Washington Post's business model, right? Yeah. But here's the dirty little secret in this, Don, is, again, because we're going to get assailed from the left or assailed from, I mean, for all I know, Julian Assange might have left-wing political beliefs. I don't know. Yeah. But here's what I will tell you, is the person who leaked the documents to him was Chelsea Manning, who did get pardoned by President Obama. So get this straight. The government official who leaked the documents to Julian Assange got a pardon. You want to know what the dirty little truth is about Chelsea Manning? Chelsea Manning is transgender.
Yes, so that was the beginning of the, like I said, I say with the trans thing. That is the most privileged class in America today.
Totally,
if you are trans, you are literally, there's nothing you can do wrong.
There's
you will
no
get away
higher
with anything.
rung in America than to be somebody who mistakes your gender for something different than your biological sex. But the funniest part about this is Chelsea Manning's transgender epiphany happened while Chelsea Manning was in prison, which tells me that Chelsea Manning is probably not transgender. Chelsea Manning is just probably highly intelligent, knowing that that would actually be how she would earn a pardon, with President Obama actually then giving that pardon to somebody who became transgender while in jail in need of a pardon, knowing that increased the likelihood of a pardon, and was correct and actually got the pardon. While Julian Assange, the person who literally just published the documents, the journalist who never signed an oath of obligation to the government, is rotting in a foreign prison. That's two standards of justice. Trump or Biden, BLM or Antifa, Douglas Mackey or Christina Wong. I don't care. We don't have two standards of the rule of law. So the way I would do this, at least this time around, I'm not going to be the president, but in my mode of running for president, the way I would have done this is turn over everybody at, not only every U.S. attorney, not just the attorney general, every assistant U.S. attorney at the DOJ. Take the FBI, they work hand in glove with. Don't try to reform it to put a different Christopher Wray on top in a different building. No, shut it down. The 15,000 cops on the front lines, move them to the U.S. Marshals, to the DEA, to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. We got to you got to roll your sleeves up and be willing to bring not the chisel, but the chainsaw. That is what this is going to take, because otherwise it is an optical illusion. And in some ways, Don, it is worse when you have those Republicans in Congress or in D.C. that are going to do what the right thing is 70% of the time, but fail in the 30% that's the most important, because it creates the optical illusion as though we're doing something and placate the people into believing something that actually happened when it didn't. That's worse than somebody who's ideologically opposed to us, because at least then the people know. Here, it's the disguise of it that actually creates the farce and the veneer itself, which comes back to the right three words: shut it down. That's the only answer. We got to have the spine to actually see it through. And without that, any change is going to be an illusion rather than actually the belief that we got something done. There's just going to be placating the people whose feet they lick in convincing you that you did something without actually shutting the darn thing down, which is the only way we're going to restore one standard of the rule of law, is turn the whole thing over, not just tinkering around the figureheads.
Yeah, listen, I'm 100% with you. And you see that. I mean, you see that with the Washington Post. You mentioned them, and they have their sort of intelligence leakers, but the leaks aren't actually real. It's just what the intelligence community wants out there. So when Assange actually publishes the real stuff, and again, given to him by someone, he's the one penalized. And then, listen, they did a little bit of, to him, it seems like what they tried to do to Trump. And all of it, magically, years later, he's a pretty famous guy, he was very popular, whatever it is, and magically, years later, oh, he was accused of, misconduct by some women and this, and, that goes nowhere because it probably wasn't anything, because they do these things.
I mean, I don't know specifically, but if I had to bet, I would say it's all made up. That's what I would say.
Hey, listen, we deal with this too. I mean, we're dealing with it this week. 30 years ago or so, I can't really remember, but then you get a New York judge that says, well, you can't show the Anderson Cooper videos or the times she's on Twitter and talking about rape being sexy, and like anyone with a brain realizes it's nonsense. But guess what? Like a jury in New York, even if there was a conservative on there, which there probably isn't, they see it. It's like, well, I'd never be able to leave my apartment again if I do this. So, there's nothing they won't weaponize, which is why you do have to shut it all down, because it's 100% accurate.
And I'm worried right now that a lot of this is playing out through the Republican Party itself. And I was, vocal about this in the late stages of the race. And I know that it made even some people in your orbit uncomfortable for me speaking the truth. I think we got to see it. I'm worried for this country, and I'm worried for your father. I'm worried for your family, and I'm worried for your country, our country, because look, the very people who are actually paying for those lawsuits against your father, who are they propping up? Actually, it's not
Nikki
even Joe
Haley.
Biden. It's not Gavin Newsom. It's Nikki Haley. And so that's why I think it is vital, Don, for the country that this race end on what day is Tuesday at the New Hampshire primary. Because my concern, and when I was a candidate, even people in the MAGA movement and people in, Trump's own orbit, I think didn't relish me saying this, but it's the truth, and I'm going to stand by it. I am worried that what they want to do is to narrow this to a two-horse race between Nikki and your father, use some sort of whatever means necessary, whatever it is, to take your father out of contention and trot their puppet into the White House under the optical illusion that it was a Republican. So they weren't even partisan about it, when that Republican, I think, is actually arguably more dangerous than many Democrats that you and I both know.
It's Hillary Clinton dressed up for Halloween as a conservative. Like, not even close.
Absolutely. And with a stronger pro-pointless war agenda, with the surveillance state imagination that even Jack Smith didn't have, tying your social media accounts to your government-issued ID to spy on you if you're criticizing a war in Ukraine, that if you criticize you're an American journalist in Ukraine, you end up in prison and they kill you. But what's coming here now, I don't think that that's an exaggeration. It's Dick Cheney on steroids. And I think that it is, what I will say is part of the reason I dropped out when I did. We were at 8% in Iowa, would have been a reasonable thing, and I think would have done similarly in New Hampshire, is I think a lot of my vote goes to Trump, and I think correctly so. And actually, we're representing the only two candidates that actually did represent the same movement, True America First principles. If you look at who was the second choice to your father, actually was way ahead of DeSantis and Haley both on all of the polling. But I stepped out because I think it's important that this race end in New Hampshire. And I would sort of say if Ron DeSantis did have the guts to drop out and endorse your father before New Hampshire too, I'd say put the whole last year behind, water under the bridge, and give him credit for doing the right thing too, because that too would be I think, admirable and honorable move for the country. I say this was hard for me to do, and I empathize. No,
I get it, man, and I see it, and I get that it's fair.
He should do that too.
There's guys we attacked a lot in 16, and there's a lot of that I actually have great relationships with now, and that's sort of it's one of the problems with the primary process, but it's a necessary evil in a certain way.
But Nikki Haley, I put in a different category than that, though. Right? Yes. This is not just friendly jousting. This is antithetical to the country. If this woman gets anywhere near the levers of power, again, I don't mean just as president, I mean anywhere near the levers of power. And so I just think it's vital. It's why I dropped out. I think it'd be a good thing if Ron did the same thing. I think that the America First movement should re-embrace Ron if he does that. If he doesn't, I think that's a problem. I think that actually is setting up for a real problem going forward if this margin in New Hampshire isn't wide enough to end this race. But I stand by what I said in my last month in the race. I am worried that there is a plot hiding in plain sight. And what I said on the day that I stepped down from that stage is, I'm worried that absent things we should never want to see happen in this country, that there's no path for me. And that's why I stepped out, so that we can focus on doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. But I think it's like really important that this race not continue past next Tuesday in New Hampshire, because if it does, I think that there are insidious forces at work that I believe have made it hellbent that they want to trot a puppet who they can control into the White House. And it's up to us as citizens to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think that's every bit as important as any other part of the agenda we've talked about right here. And, I'm all in for the country to make sure that that happens.
Well, I appreciate it, and you are, and thank you for all your help with that. I look forward to actually spending a lot more time. There's so many ideas, so much more I want to talk to you about eventually. Sort of the Patriot economy, more about Strive, some of the other businesses that are out there, because I think again, you cut off the dollars and it changes things dramatically as well. And it's not just playing in the political field or through the executive branch or the legislative branch, but real Americans can make a difference there for playing that right. And obviously you bring a lot of advice and experience to that I want other Americans to understand. And so would love to have you back on, man. I look forward to seeing you out on the road. I know you had a hard out, but I really appreciate everything, Vivek. And I think, honestly, just reading the comments, people get it, man. They see you made a lot of friends tonight. They understand people that were skeptical. One guy, actually, I saw the comment. It was funny. You got to change your last name to Magaswamy. So just in case, listen, you don't want to change your name, but if you did, I think that's a pretty good one. That was a pretty solid compliment.
Maybe we could talk about this next time too. Is I get, when people think, oh, there's some guy out of nowhere, what are his intentions and who this is? There was some skepticism. I think there's two things. One is do your actual, homework a little bit. I didn't really come out of nowhere, but functioning politics did. But at a certain point, we have to, we got a country to save. And so channel that to a good place. But as long as we're actually marching in the same direction to get this done, we should have the conversation next time about the Patriot economy and about
I'd love to do that,
markets to drive this change too. So I'm going to be in New Hampshire. I think I'm at least planning to go to New Hampshire for Tuesday and be helpful as I can on the trail. And I don't know.
Great, I'll be there a bit over the weekend on a Monday and stuff. So our paths will cross there. Otherwise, they will soon enough. But Vivek, I really appreciate it.
Thank
guys,
you.
I'm going to stick around. I'm going to take some of your questions because I see a lot of them. But I thought that was great, actually. But I am going to stick around. I'm going to take some of your guys' questions. And, it's interesting. I want to see, has your opinion changed? Before I get to questions, maybe I want to just thank our sponsors. I know I was a little bit rushed and we started a little bit earlier. But, that's so important, like what we're talking about right now, finishing up with the Patriot economy. We touched on it a little bit, but we didn't get out into the details. Go check out the Wellness Company, who's a leading provider in emergency medical kits. We saw what happened with COVID and the chaos and the lockdowns and the failures. The Wellness Company's medical emergency kit empowers you to take control of your health, and that's a big tenet of what we're talking about. You can avoid the high costs, the hospital wait lines when there's actually a crisis, and take care and control of your family's health needs. Go to twc.health/triggered for a 15% discount on the emergency medical kit for basically what you have for any situation. The other one I want you to check out, these are really good friends of mine, is Patriot Mobile. They literally take a portion of every dollar and they donate it towards conservative causes. Remember, AT&T was literally, their parent company was trying to cancel OAN and Newsmax, conservative program on Dish, which they owned. Like that's who you could be funding, or you can fund a company that's going to take your dollars, fight for the causes that you believe in. You keep your phone. You keep your telephone number. There's literally no reason to do it. So for fast, free activation, go to patriotmobile.com/triggered. Pull it up in your browser right now before I get to questions, but patriotmobile.com/triggered, just like the name of the show. It's a no-brainer, guys. You're going to have a phone in your pocket anyway, and you can fund the woke beast that will eat you alive and throw you in the gulags, or you can fight with the people who share your values. It's a no-brainer, and we got to support ourselves. That's a big part of it. So patriotmobile.com/triggered. Pull that up in your browser right now, and when I get done talking, go make the switch, because it's a big deal, and it's important, and it's going to be a huge element of this fight going in the future. If they have all your money, if they have everything else, guess what? They're not going to listen to you on anything else. So I'm going to take your questions for a little bit. Going to open it up to the guys on locals as well. And make sure I take care of those questions, because I've been on the road so much all over the place. I haven't been able to go, live on locals, because by the time I get done with the show, I was in like -40 in Iowa, so it was brutal. But make sure to get to those questions, because it's been a week or so. But let's fire away. You guys got anything good out here for me? So what did you think? I know there was always some skepticism. I see a lot less of it now. You can see, whether you like it or not, the guy has gone down the rabbit hole. He is knowledgeable. He understands the Constitution. What's his foreign policy stance? You know what? We didn't even get into it, but it's pretty clear he's anti-war. It seems like he's got very much the Trump foreign policy, which is the opposite of Nikki Haley, who would be in every war, in every country, on every continent imaginable. So I've seen a bunch of Vivek for VP. I like that. And I also saw a bunch of, make him like the, blow shit up czar, basically. Like, just get in there and, take down these institutions. By the way, both of which important and interesting. Vivek's an intellectual MAGA. Yeah. No, like I said, you could see also a constitutionalist. Like, he gets the real process there. And again, a lot of people don't always understand those things. So he understands what it is not going to be bossed around. I thought, he did that very well with the media, the way he handled them. We got to slow down the live chat, because I'm the blow shit up czar. Someone likes that. Okay, but I can't read these questions, because unless it's like 4 words or less, it's going too fast. Trump Jr. POTUS when Senior is done. Why I appreciate that, guys. That's a great honor. That's a gret honor. But maybe one day. Let's get through this one first, because if we don't, honestly, there's this. I don't know that the system's ever recoverable at that point. Do I really trust him? Okay, listen. It's a fair question. Honestly, I think I do. I mean, certainly more so than a lot of the other people that have been out there. I mean, certainly more than Nikki Haley. As you guys know, if you've been watching my show for some time, what I always said was, man, I love everything that he's actually saying. I was pretty clear with you guys. Even I was like, of the candidates in the race, once I got to hear what he was saying, I was like, he's actually sort of my number 2 pick after your favorite president, Donald J. Trump. Because of the things. I never saw him really flip-flop, but I also said, hey, I didn't know where he was in 16, in 20, 22, 18, as much. Now, he was running a business. So was I. Guess what? Prior to 16, I've been a lifelong conservative. I'm a huge Pro-2A advocate. I was doing those things. I was having those conversations in New York, but I also wasn't all that vocal about it, because it wasn't how I made a living. I wasn't necessarily in that fight. I was a real estate developer in New York. My first political fundraiser ever was for Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York, who was running for attorney general. Because guess what? If you're a real estate developer, you have an offering plan. It's a book like this thick that delineates every aspect of the building and what you're selling. And guess who has to sign off on that? The attorney general of New York. We knew him as family friends. I knew his friends. I was like, you know what? Like, that's part of the game. It didn't make me a liberal. It was part of my job, basically, to do those things. So, I wasn't vocally conservative. My friends knew where I stood. So, people could say the same thing about you. Well, where were you before 16? Now, I've been in the game now for 7, 8 years, whatever it is. So, I think I've more than proven myself. But when someone is new and they get into politics, you got to give them that chance for a runway. So, honestly, compared to what I see in D.C. and from what I see from the rhinos out there and stuff like that, I don't know, man. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt out of, over those clowns that I've seen sell us out each and every time so much. So, okay, I actually saw this one a lot came up during the chat. Again, I'm looking down because I'm trying to read the comments along the way. I've seen a lot of it, and it's Carson for VP. And I was with Ben Carson earlier today, actually, and his wife. Just some of the finest human beings anywhere in the world. It's brilliant guy, just nice. I mean, they were there because they went to Melania's mother's funeral, which was our family get together today, unfortunately. And I think he'd be a wonderful vice president. My only concern with Ben Carson is he literally just too nice a human being to enter that world with what they'll try to do to Trump, or frankly anyone who's MAGA right now, or probably anyone at this point. Our Secretary of Defense doesn't feel the need to let the Biden administration know that he's going to be in the hospital incapacitated for a week. They don't feel that way because they don't feel they need to report to the executive branch. They no longer report to civilian leadership. The deep state, or the military-industrial complex is totally in charge. So, I think he'd be great. I just worry about just the times. And, he's a gentleman. You're right. I almost think you need someone more vicious than just a gentleman, unfortunately. That's, but truly one of the finest human beings ever. So it'd be an awesome choice. I think it'd be great for America. And, and we'll see. So some people do like Vivek for there. Obviously, I've said that'd be great, and if you can do that, or you create the blow shit up commission, give them some power to actually get rid of these. Again, not just to cut off the head of the snake, where the next 100 people all amass into the exact same position because they're basically like the Borg at this point. But take some stuff. That would be great. Carol Swain for VP. I don't know where she stands politically. I know she's a brilliant woman. But again, for me, I'm not into just, a brilliant woman who happens to be African American. If that's the right person, I think that's wonderful. I don't want to do like the Democrat thing, which is like pick an incompetent woman that checks off a couple boxes and be like, we're playing diversity politics. I think we lose when we start playing that game. It never feels credible. You can get away with that if you're a Democrat because there's so much more sheep. But and look what that's got them. Who could have seen it? Kamala Harris, who's polling at 1% in the Democrat primary after spending ungodly amounts of money. A natural VP pick, of course. And now you see that we have a VP that can't complete a sentence. Rick Grinnell for VP, that would drive some people crazy. Listen, there's a lot of Rick he could be great at state, some sort of diplomatic position, even Secretary of State. That would drive a lot of people crazy, and he'd get things done. He was the guys that called out Germany when it was like, hey, NATO, Germany, you want us to protect you. You also want to give Russia billions of dollars for a pipeline. You're not contributing your share for NATO, but you want us to step it up. I don't understand. That was my father's policy. He delivered those messages and, made him unpopular there. But as far as I'm concerned, he was I'd say he was almost definitely, our most aggressive and successful ambassador that way, delivering those kinds of things. So he'd be great. Seems everyone loves Rick. He'd be great. Byron Donalds would be great. Okay. So next week, we're going to have some fun ones. I had a great time with Byron Donalds the other night. He was in Iowa with Wesley Hunt. It was like Byron, me, Wesley Hunt, Matt Gaetz, Kim, whole group. But Byron, Wesley, and I, we stayed out late and had a really, really fun time. I mean, so Wesley's going to be on the show next week. I'll have Byron on soon. We'll talk about that one because it was pretty funny. It was pretty funny. So is Michelle Obama gonna run? Okay. Guys, if you're over on Locals and you follow me there and you're on, I'm gonna simultaneously do that one. I'm gonna make sure to hit your questions. I know I've been a little bit late. I think we got a lot of people still going there. I'm gonna focus on your guys' questions, but I'll see them both. But if you're over there, check it out because it's gonna be fun. But yeah, we're gonna have Bongino for VP. That honestly, Dan would be great. He'd also be great in one of those sort of, again, positions to just end nonsense. Yeah, I mean, he was a Secret Service agent, law enforcement. Like, put him in charge of the FBI and getting rid of the crap down below there. I mean, but there's a lot. There's a lot we could do with Dan, and he's just a great guy. Vivek for AG. By the way, I like that. And I know he's a practicing lawyer, so it could actually work. I could see it being a problem with confirmation because I think there's certain things they sort of expect. Even the Republicans, not even the Republicans are worse than half the Democrats, it seems. But certainly an interesting one again. And he, whether he has the full legal experience, whatever that means, that they'd need for confirmation, it's a whole different thing than whether he has the knowledge. He clearly has the knowledge. So that's great. Well, listen, so there's still going to be some haters, but I can't tell sometimes that the haters are also trolls. So I think Vivek for press secretary. Well, I imagine he'd want something other than that, but man, he'd be good at it. And again, it's not a small role. It's just, it's actually a really important one. You're basically the face of the administration for all intents and purposes. On a daily basis. And again, I like watching him is a big thing. So questions USA Now on locals. I'm trying to see. Blow shit up job. The butchers are. Yeah. Yes. I probably, are we having a hard time pulling up the locals chat on the screen? All right. So locals, put them in there. Team's gonna take your questions. They're gonna put them up on the screen here because I don't know. We moved studios. So this was the thing. So Kim and I were literally working out of our gym doing this. We actually built out a whole new studio so that we could do it more, so we could have eventually couches, do a lot more stuff easy in person. So this is literally the first live well, I guess second because Kim went earlier. But and she had some sound problems, so you guys are really screwed. I may have to fire my team later on, but... So if you don't see me for a couple of weeks, it's because I fired my team without the foresight of having someone else in the wings. But no, they're all kidding aside. They're going to throw that stuff up there now. But yeah, the butchers are. I like that. And again, I think it probably is slightly more eloquently worded than the blow shit ups are, which I think is effective, but probably would have a hard time being talked about on national television. So. Not that anyone watches national television anymore because, give Melania some hugs. I did. It's, it's hard. It's, I went through it with my mother last summer. It's, it's never easy, man. Life's not easy. Guess what? That's the reality. Like, life's not easy. Every time you think it's easy or you think you got it, someone kicks you in the dick and it's, you start from scratch. So, Dana White for VP. Okay, I see a lot of Tucker. You understand my position on that one. Tucker for VP, that would be certainly a top 2 or 3 for me, without question. What are you going to do about Governor Kemp? That's an interesting one because it's clear. It's clear right now there is total impropriety in that office. This is the Fannie Willis Georgia case. It is. Absolutely lunacy that could happen, and he could very easily call a commission and look into it. And if he's going to stand by and pretend like this is fine and not, either because he's afraid to do it, if you're a conservative, like just wait till they do it to you guys. So I think it's absolutely insane, and I think it probably destroys any future political aspirations he has. But he is the sitting governor of Georgia, so maybe he knows more than me. But it is. It's pretty crazy. I mean, it's so flagrant. You hire a divorce attorney to someone who's never criminally prosecuted anyone to do this, to bring him in. You pay him almost $750,000. You then go on vacations lavishly while having an extramarital affair, like on the dime of this. He billed a 24-hour day for some of these things, and not even legal in Georgia under it's such a sham. But Kemp's clearly no fan of my father, so he'll probably let it play out and see if he can hurt him, and then swoop in and be a hero of the rhinos. But just so we understand, like no one's going to do well. No rhino has a future in the Republican Party long term at this point. Like, if they're going to be like that, I think it's over. They may have a little bit of tenure. They may even, some of them may even keep getting elected, but like, that party is over as far as I'm concerned. So we need Vivek all over the FDA from Comfort and Joy over on local. Yes. By the way, that's a great one. What you almost need to do is find someone who gets all of these agencies. You get a Dan Bongino to handle, federal law enforcement, FBI, and others. You get a Vivek to do the FDA, where he understands all sides of that, the players, the equation, this. Because you're right. It just to have a general blow shit up czar, it's probably too big. I mean, that's not the kind of thing you could do in 8 years or 4 years or 50 years. You probably need someone at the head of every one of these, arms, extensions of government. And, that's a big deal. So we need to pick up a younger generation of voters. Well, I hope they see what's going on in the world. I know that they're going to have Taylor Swift out there telling you that Joe Biden's doing a wonderful job and all that stuff. But like, Trump actually outperformed in the exit polls. He got more young voters than anyone else. DeSantis was trying to claim that based on entrance polls, but actually voting, Trump actually won that one. I think a guy like Vivek actually speaks to that younger generation. I try to, I'm an in-between, right? I probably think of myself as much younger than I am, but being anti-war. Well, guess what? Who's going to fight those wars? My kids, not me. I'm 46. Unless we end up in a Ukraine type situation where they're sending 45-year-old plus conscripts like they are over there because the whole thing's ridiculous. I'm not going there, but I have 5 young kids, 16 to 9, and they're going to be fighting those wars. I don't know. You want Nikki Haley? That's wonderful. You want a Democrat like Joe Biden who's gotten us into like all this messes, or whose weakness has encouraged others to start these messes? I don't know. That seems kind of obvious. How about interest rates? You want to ever own your own house, apartment, or these kind? We probably don't do a great messaging job. You'd be one hell of a sniper. Well, thank you, Joe. I would be, actually. I'd be damn good at that. I don't do much well, but I shoot long range accurately. It's a skill set, but, we'll see. You never know. Hey, at this rate, if Joe Biden wins, you never know. Maybe that happens. But, I think kids have to look at reality. You see that. Like, a lot of the rappers coming out, be like, I'm done with Biden. Like, because there's only so many times, how many times can you cry wolf and tell people you're going to do something for them and then fail them across every spectrum of imaginable? Like, people are waking up and they're sick of it. And the bigger thing with Trump was that they saw their own prosperity during the first Trump administration. Then they saw it all disappear like that. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. But I think a guy like Vivek can speak to that younger generation. I think he did a really good job with that. I think that's important, and I think you need all of these people out there willing to fight those fronts. You're not putting Mitch McConnell out there to pick up a younger generation. I think Trump is an anomaly in that, with his age, he can still speak to those young guys because he's funny. He's personable. He makes you laugh. He's the guy you want to have a beer with. Oh, I love that one. King David 80 FE. Sean Strickland for VP. I think, for press secretary. Yes. I think Monday's show, we're going to do something where, there's just so much happened this week, that we didn't cover. I know Vivek had a clean hour for us tonight, but normally I want to do, sort of news of the week and, go through that. I think I may just do an ad-lib show on Mondays. Is that what we're doing? Okay. Where I'm just going to go through all the news of the week. Make sure to put that one on the list, because guess what? If you put that interview up on Rumble or on YouTube, it wouldn't work. On Rumble, it's just fine. But Sean Strickland, they tried getting him with this guy, like LGBTQIA plus, bullshit question. And he literally just owned these people. It was awesome. And honestly, if everyone handled the press like Dana White, maybe DJT, and Sean Strickland, guess what? They would stop pulling their bullshit. And the problem is when they pull their bullshit, it actually turns into like the gospel because no one contests it. So they believe a lie is a fact. DeSantis sort of walked into that at the town hall this week where he's like, CNN, the people that drowned at the border. It's like, it didn't happen. It was retracted. The fact that he got up on stage, was asked a question about something, and no one informed him that, it was all a lie. And, they get what they want out of it, but It was nonsense. It was such a missed opportunity. His team did a shitty job, prepping him for that. But it's like, but it happens a lot. People don't know. You just assume what they're telling you is the gospel as opposed to their dreams and hopes with maybe, 0.5% of truth of something. And in this case, there was nothing, but it doesn't matter. And then it becomes, well, he said it. It's on TV. This is it's based off of a lie. It's like so much of what we've seen. Russia. Well, Adam Schiff, the head of the intelligence committee, he's literally seen the evidence, folks. Remember that? He's seen the evidence. It's like, well, still waiting, folks. Like, where is it? I mean, he could have put me in jail for life or wanted to try me with a death penalty. So let's go. Where is it? Remember, I did 50 hours of testimony for that one. Baby Hunter doesn't have to do anything. So it's a little different. Robert Barnes for AG, that'd be a good one. Rand Paul for VP. Rand Paul, by the way, is a good one on the waste stuff as well. I see some Kristi Noem. Let's see. So we need to pick up so we're working on the younger generation, but again, I think they got to understand what this current administration means for them. I mean, I saw some interviews. It's like, I really care about transit. I'm like, man, you wait till you get into life and your parents aren't paying for you. Ooh, that's a good idea. My buddy George from BTE, Battle Tested Equipment over in Arizona, triggered special from SHOT Show. I hadn't thought about that, but there's going to be some good people over there, and I'm going to be there midweek. So, all right, we may have to rearrange next week, and figure some of that out because that could make sense. And I know a lot of good friends that are going to be there. We could have some fun with that one. Good idea, George. I like that. I'm going to be at SHOT, so I'm sure there'll be a bunch of people there that could be fun and cool. Whether I don't know. I'm trying to think who came to the last Field Ethos party. That you had Dan Henderson's over there. It always comes to that. You had a bunch of the athletes. You have a bunch of the great operators. Rob O'Neill's usually there. He's a buddy. Some of these guys hung out a bunch. I imagine Evan Hafer, Matt Best from Black Rifle Coffee. They'll be there. They're good. Okay, we could actually do something pretty fun there. Tories, Rand Paul's powerful. Jay Sekulow for Attorney General. Come from Joy over there. DeSantis is a real shame. He was great in Florida. Yeah, that's the problem, man. You can be good in Florida. States, even a big state like Florida, it's like you can do that, but then you get into the big leagues and the national interests get involved and start funding you, and that's when they own your ass, and that's the problem with the system. Rick Harrison from Pawn Stars. He's a buddy. He'd be funny as hell on the show. We could actually bang out a bunch of shows next week. We have to go live every night. Because a bunch of times I try to get some in the bag. If I know I'm going to be traveling or on the road, it's I just need something that's evergreen. But the world changes so quickly, so rapidly that it's sometimes I don't, I do it and it's a great interview for that day. A week later, even if the stuff that's kind of evergreen, it's never quite as good. So Tate, Andrew's a friend of mine, and Tristan, they came over and saw me at Trump Tower in 2015. I was following them. I thought it was just hilarious. So way before they put Andrew Tate somewhere, anywhere. That's funny. I think honestly they're smart. I'd asked last time I spoke to him, this is even before, by the way, this is before the Romania bullshit. He's honestly, I just don't trust going to the United States now. I just see myself being targeted unjustly. And then it literally happened that way in Romania. So listen, I love Eastern Europe. Maybe I have to go over there and hang out with those guys. But like I said, I always had a good relationship with, and it's weird. You keep falling for these same things, and it's strange. It's what I always talk about with General Flynn, where it was the CIA said he did this, and the FBI said he did this. I was man, I know the guy pretty good. It doesn't sound like it. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't line up. But there has to be some truth to this. So you see this stuff. Trafficking children. I'm that's the end of the line. So I'm come on, it's got to be. But you also if it's not, you cut. So you. you just stay silent, or you don't address it, or you don't go in there. So I was pretty quick to jump back on that. Like, this sounds like bullshit. But all of these things are designed specifically to do just that, to take other people out of the game. Now, Andrew Tate clearly doesn't need anyone to defend him. He's pretty damn good at it himself. But you can see when they're jumping on. And, at this point, I just don't trust anything that anyone throws. But it took me, my father, I'm a late adapter, what they did to Flynn, and then ultimately Tate, for me to be like, I just don't trust anyone in any one of these systems at this point. So that'll be Don Jr. versus Hunter MMA. Just, let me know. If we can raise some money for charity, we'll have some fun. Will Cash be working? Cash obviously would be a great person, in there somewhere. He gets it. He knows where the bodies are buried. He knows what they'd be hiding. Is your check, slow down, scroll back down. Something about, is your check somehow related to your check grandma? I don't know. Troll person? Okay, yeah, maybe. If they're check, possibly. Who knows? Can we bring Fauci to justice? I think that'd be a great start. God knows we need it. I mean, I can't think of someone who pulled the wool over the eyes of the American people, more than that. And for, honestly, not just the last few years, but for the last, 40 years, it seems. Tucker for FCC chairman. That'd be a good one. Okay. I love Tucker for VP because you guys understand that selfishly, all I want to see is the Tucker Carlson, Kamala Harris vice presidential debate. You understand that, right? Not that he wouldn't, like I said, I've been very clear. He's my first, maybe second or third. He's clearly top 2 or 3, probably number 1, but he would be anyway. But that's really the icing on the cake. Although, listen, I would love to see, I'd love to see Vivek, debate Kamala on real issues. I mean, honestly, I think anyone could actually debate Kamala Harris at this point. You just, the verbal diarrhea, word salad crap that comes out of her mouth on every speech. It's like someone's writing that speech. I think, listen, the left has done an incredible job of infiltrating every aspect of our government, every institution, every item of pop culture. But some conservative got into the Biden administration and became Kamala Harris's speechwriter. Not that they're writing conservative stuff, but that the crap that they string together cannot possibly be done by someone who's a Democrat. It's literally impossible to imagine. Okay. Kamala looks drunk now. You think she's been drinking? And Tucker would be on Fox again. Oh, Cutter, that's amazing. Or is that T-Lin B? Okay. And, dude, imagine that. Tucker as VP or press secretary, just to force Fox to put him on again. That would blow up their minds. And, I know this as someone who was on Fox almost every day myself for years, and then, I've been blackballed for a year and a half. But yes, that would be, just make them do it. And, Paul Ryan over there at the Fox, board meeting would be losing his mind. That would be incredible. Yeah, the Kamala comments are pretty hilarious. What was that one with the VP decision ultimately made by family? Is the VP decision ultimately? Oh, how's the VP decision made ultimately? The family. Okay, so this is an interesting one. We did this in I guess after the convention in 2016, and we were actually pretty involved. I mean, I know hey, at that time, Chris Christie was in the running, and I sort of shut that one down at just basically being, hey, we already have a pirate. We don't need 2 pirates. That would just be a disaster, and you can clearly see that I nailed that one. So I didn't want to. The other people that were in there were Newt Gingrich and Pence. And I think Gingrich would have been great. Sean Hannity was pushing that one very hard, and I spent a lot of time with Sean back in those days, talking about it. And we did it, and we sat down with him and Callisto, and we actually did it while traveling to go see Pence as well, and it was almost like a family interview. And he's brilliant. my sort of breakout moment in politics in 16 was really my Republican National Convention speech, where they were like, Don Jr. for president soon, or like, and it was like, and I'd spent a lot of time on this speech, worked on it hard, tried delivering it right, and like I showed it to him. We're literally on a plane going to Indiana, and he was traveling with us, so we're meeting with him, and we're meeting with Pence, and I go, you know what? I got like the former Speaker of the House, sort of a brilliant, tactician as it relates to politics, like someone who's been doing this much longer. I'd been in politics all of like 4 months at this point. I was like, maybe I should take this couple minutes and have him look at my speech. And he read it. Like, spent like 15 minutes. And he goes, that is a really good speech. And he just goes, take every 4 and 5 syllable word in there and make it 2. And I was like, he was like, this speech just, it probably uses the word, dumb it down. But just make it that everyone gets every word, that there's no one, wondering, and I was like, okay, I think I have a decent vocabulary, though. Don't always use it as much anymore, but perhaps I've adapted that mentality. And I did that, and it was like, it was sort of a launch point for me. So he was brilliant, and we're sitting there, and, but he'd been very successful in the private sector after years and decades in government and everything like that. And I was sort of seeing so I'd have to stop doing X, I'd have to stop doing Y, and I literally just asked the question pretty bluntly. I just said, sir, do you actually want the job? He's like, no, it'd be an honor to serve it. I go, no, there's a difference between, I understand, the honor of it, but do you actually want it? Because there is a difference. And he was like, you know what? It's actually a really good question. And so that was sort of where he's like, I'm not sure I want to change my life and get back into that world right now. So he's been a great friend, and he's great out there. But it was an interesting one. When we met with the Pences, that one was interesting as well. Very, very humble, very and so it was actually sort of a great one at the time. Before we knew how vicious it would get, before we knew the lies, it was sort of like, okay, it was a little bit yin and yang. You almost had like an opposite, of my father in many ways. And so it was interesting. We sat there and we had a breakfast at the governor's mansion, and they were just nice people, and they didn't have like this, crazy staff like you see, with a lot of governors. I was like, these are kind of like our people, very, very different, but also, but good. And, like I said, I think, for the most part, I think that was the right call at that time. At this time, it's different. Now we've seen what they're willing to do. Now we've seen them weaponize every aspect of government. Now we've seen the just depravity, the evil, the viciousness, the willingness to just flagrantly disregard our laws and our systems. And now you need someone a little bit more of an animal, in my opinion. Okay. Donnie's driving home from work now. Great show. Okay, so you listening. So, by the way, do any of you guys get it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, like iTunes Podcasts? Do any of you guys do that or not? Because I'm always wondering if people do, or if they just watch it here or on Rumble and whatever. So I'm just kind of curious, because I know I do the push there. I try to get it there because I want to get it out as much as I can. I do so much driving and flying that sometimes it's easier to listen. I can't always stream. So do any of you guys do it that way? Okay, so Steph says nope, not here, not really. All right, the locals people, I could see that, especially if you're on locals there. You had one iTunes on locals? Okay. William, only here on Rumble. Okay, so all the locals folks who seem like they're pretty wed to Rumble. Seems like almost everyone is. By the way, I get that. It was sort of interesting. I see some of the other podcasts that are out there and where they get ranked in the stores and stuff like that. I'm always like, dude, I look at our numbers. I'm like, dude, we crushed that. Now I am only on 2 days a week. A lot of those shows are sort of, 5 day a week. So that is a little different, I guess. And so I was just wondering, but that's interesting. So it seems like, and that makes total sense, by the way. Like the Rumble crowd is very Rumble. It's, you're away from other big tech, even, obviously Apple or Spotify, that, where there's more of that bias. So that's interesting. Anyone else You watch on Rumble via Roku. That's interesting. You get like the big screen version. Okay, then, yeah, so what I want to do now that we have the new studio, I want to do like a wall where, I have a little bit of my stuff, like, get a couple of deer heads on the wall, maybe some old guns, have a little bit more fun with that. That way, not for everyone, but for some people, we can have, sort of the outdoor conversations and break it up a little bit from the politics. Is anyone interested in that? So I'm asking both chats. I mean, obviously, it started off sort of as Alex Jones press secretary. Obviously, that'd be like, just even for like 2 weeks, just to humble those bastards. So anyone interested in that idea of like a rugged cabin look? Because honestly, that's basically me, in my free time. So would you? Okay, see a bunch of yes. Literally, talk hunting, fishing, the outdoors with some of those people. Maybe some of the good shooters out there. Tell those kind of campfire stories. Uncle Ted campfire time. That would be fun. Yeah. Okay. Always down to talk outdoorsy shit. Maybe we even just do that like as a once a week kind of thing and add another show. We've been talking to a couple people. They're like, some people want me to go 5 days a week. I love the idea, but I also know I'm on the road so much. It's not the easiest thing in the world. So trying to figure that one out. You'll watch with any background. Okay, so that's a question for you. Does background matter? Does anyone give a shit? Seriously, no, I mean, I understand that I am a sexy bitch. All right? And, I can look good for you guys here on the show, but like I don't put makeup on. I don't do what I did when I was, going on TV a lot because it's just sort of me. It's natural. I come in here a couple minutes before we go live and I go. So I try to keep it real that way. I think sometimes you talk. Sometimes honestly you could try too hard. If you're spending too much time thinking about what you're going to be talking about, it actually sounds. Don't hang a rainbow flag. Don't you worry. It's fine. And I've been very clear, as you know, I don't give a crap what you do. Just stay the fuck away from our kids. Leave me alone. Rick Grinnell, who seems to be pretty popular in this feed, first gay guy that was a director of national intelligence. And so, but no one cares because it's not about that. He's just competent and good. Yes, more hunt. Okay, so there is more. There are people that want more of the outdoor stories. So I think we could have some get with Grand Thumb at Shot. That could be fun. Okay, there's some people that say no. Well, maybe we just do it as like a third show a week, and we do like one show outdoors. That way, you guys can choose. I don't know. I'm just trying to adapt to you guys. But backgrounds are not necessary. So you don't give a shit. Okay, because that's interesting. I wasn't sure. With the live video, does it matter? Nugent for ATF? Yes. That would be great. Alina Habba for Attorney General. That's interesting. Personalized. Okay, so see, some people want personalized the wall, but I think we now like have a full studio. So like, there's 4 walls. I could do that on one of the walls, or like one of the corners, or something like that, where I could do that. Literally, I told them to build the room. Better have put it in here. I've been on the road so much. I haven't been paying so much attention. I literally I told him, hey, I want like an HVAC system that sucks out so that I could have cigars while doing the podcast because it'd make it more enjoyable for me. It could be kind of fun. Not that I would do it every time because I'm sort of an all or nothing guy. I got to kind of keep my vices to a limit, but it could be fun. So they should have done it. I want to do it, but all right, so you guys like that? Background and wardrobe does matter, but not so much on a conscious level. Find your brand. Rugged world work. Yeah, it's interesting because I just do this because I almost never wear a tie. I try to avoid it, but some things I do need to wear a suit. But the reality is, like, I actually, I was wearing Carhartts like 25 years before Carhartts were for people who don't actually work. It's like Stanley, right? Like I had Stanley thermoses way before Yeti, and way before they became like the symbol of rich white suburban women. Like it's sort of, hey, listen, I understand companies, you rebrand, but it's like, I have Carhartts that are older than most of the people who are now wearing Carhartt. And they're still holding up. I'm seeing some of these women, none of the people that wear Carhartt these days, other than maybe the construction workers who still wear it by default, but the average person I see wearing Carhartt these days definitely does not do any Carhartt shit whatsoever. So it's interesting. But as a business guy, I understand it. You got to expand your brand. Other people expanded into workwear. They didn't have the monopoly on it anymore between Dickies and all that stuff. So I was like, maybe it changed. So, yeah, you had Stanley too. Like I had like Stanley when it was green, not before it was like fluorescent pink. When it was like the traditional green Stanley. I have a Stanley mug in my office. It was like one of the original like Cerakote. Like it's literally like you see more steel than you do the original coating because it's all like been just chipped off over decades. So it's funny now. I'm seeing like the Stanley cups and like. I'm seeing dudes with like big pink Stanley cups. I'm saying, what's going on here? But yeah, Levi's used to be good too. They got a little bit woke. Carhartt went woke as fuck. I guess that was they did that. So I don't know. I think that's an interesting one. But hey, listen, I respect if you go to a different genre or you change what you need to do or you rebrand or reposition. To be a business, that may make sense. If your other market's dried up or you see another opportunity, I think that's smart. I mean, I see teenage girls wearing Carhartt right now. I'm saying, I'm not sure what that ever stood for, but I get it. If they're selling more stuff, that's probably a good business decision. From locals, okay, best Senate candidates, best pick for press secretary. Well, I mean, you got Alex Jones, you got Ted Nugent. Some of the suggestions would be great, certainly for a temporary one. Best Senate candidates. Oh, right now I'm a big fan of Bernie Moreno over in Ohio. He's running in what'll be hopefully we can flip that to get a Republican seat. That he's endorsed by my father, by me, but also by J.D. Vance, who was my best pick last time around. In the last cycle, and who's absolutely been crushing it. As far as I'm concerned, like by far the best person we have in the United States Senate, and he's just, just absolutely says what it is. Bernie was running against JD, and it was a tough call because I was friendly with both of them, but JD was like, but I think Bernie Moreno right now would be amazing. I'm good friends with Governor Jim Justice down in West Virginia. I know he's running for Senate there. He's just a super successful business guy. He gets it. He was basically a former Democrat because he had to be in West Virginia. There was no, the blue collar guy, even the successful one, if farming and, you were a Democrat. He literally, we went turkey hunting and a week later, he switched parties and ran as a Republican and has been delivering in West Virginia. So, hey, listen, we got to welcome all of these things. I think he was basically, a West Virginia Democrat it's not like an LA Democrat. It was basically, that was the party of the blue collar worker. Trump took that over. It's now the Republican Party, and it's very different. But I'd love to see him in a Senate seat in West Virginia after doing what he did, in West Virginia in the governor's mansion. Who else I got to think about? Carrie. Yeah. Sorry, obviously. Jesus, I was with her yesterday too. Carrie Lake in Arizona would be great. She'd bring some spice to the United States Senate and to the rhinos that need it. I think she'd be awesome. So that would be a big one. On that map. A lot going on. I mean, there's some big. This is the last chance in 10 years that we can actually make some gains in the United States Senate, just based on where there are sort of purple states where we have a chance to actually make some gains that you don't have in the next cycle. So we got to really do a lot there. William Wallace, you love where residents are treated like presidents. The meme my father put up, where basically the White House is a big nursing home and it's pictures of Joe Biden lost on stage. And it's talking about turning the White House into an elder care facility. And that was pretty funny. Jeff Duncan in 3rd District House in South Carolina. Interesting. Don, what would you do with Joy Reid's wig? Like in the meme? Oh, yeah, what was that? So someone made it. I have no idea, but I posted it on my Instagram. Go check it out. I think I also posted it on Twitter and Truth. It was literally a video of me like ice fishing when I was out there with Blacktip H, my buddy. We were up in Wisconsin, actually. We were out on the ice in Milwaukee, fishing for, giant, giant trout through the ice. It's just a video. And I was like, I lost one. I was like, oh, we just feel the line go slack. And they superimposed it over Joey Reid with that, like, it was basically like a Trump wig. It almost looked like. I don't think she intended it to be so, but it was like a white wig with the comb over it, and me literally pulling it off her head. So go check it out. If you're not following me on Twitter or Truth or Instagram, like go follow me in all those places because I use them all a little bit differently. Do I ever bring Kimberly on here? That's a good question. Actually, my opening show, the first show ever, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary, by the way. When is that? A couple more weeks. Okay. 1-year anniversary. Yeah. USA Now just posted it in locals. It's I think it's pretty amazing. It's quick, but it is funny. And so she was on the opening show. She's got her show before. Yeah, we got to do more, but the problem, you fuckers get me in trouble here because you ask all the questions like, oh, so when are you getting married? It's like, they're not even necessarily inappropriate questions. They're just questions I don't want to have to answer publicly. And she's got her own show at 4:00 before this. So, but no, she's great on there because that is what I call, and I mean this very affectionately, a very spicy broad. She's always fun because she's great. I should have Kimberly on here more. Scott Pressler, that's a great suggestion. Let's make that happen. That fucking guy is out there breaking his ass, registering Republican voters. I try to prop him up wherever we can. Eventually, you just got to bring him into one of the bigger institutions and let him do his thing on scale. But that guy's all over the place, always fighting, registering voters, doing. I mean, honestly, so much more than so many of the establishment people in there. I think that's a great idea. Dylan Mulvaney for press secretary. Yeah, Tori. Yeah, Kimberly's a natural. She's got a great show. A little different format. I'm a little bit longer form. I rant a little bit more. What's sort of funny, and I pull it out of her on the shows, like on Kim with her show, like she's so used to just like pro news, like undefeated death penalty prosecutor, this kind of stuff. Like Kim actually behind the scenes is like inappropriate, funny ball breaker. It's sort of great, but like on her show, she's just so prim and proper. I feel sometimes I'm like, so she's got to come on my show, so you see a lot more of that. That's a big one. So I feel like sometimes she's reluctant to do that. She does that the same. But we'll go, give a speech somewhere. I'm like, just go ad lib it. She's like, no, I want to be proper. I'm going to write something out. I'm going to do. And I'm like, but she's literally one of the best impromptu speakers there is. Period. Like she's amazing. So, it's interesting. We could have some fun with that one. Brendan Straka really got screwed on J6. 100% right. So Pressler and Brendan Straka. Those are both good, actually. They're guys that actually do a lot of shit naturally that don't get enough credit for it. It's hard, man. I try to. Whether it's me posting memes or whether it's whatever else it is, like I literally try to give credit where I know, and then I get people pissed off. Oh, he didn't tag me. I'm like, dude, I could have a meme that's sent to me. It's already blurry. It's been screenshot and forwarded so many times. Like I may not always know. Sometimes I just throw something up there because it's funny. I don't see the watermark or whatever it is. Like I do my best to do it, but there are some serious unsung heroes out there that we got to try to get them a little bit more attention. So. We'll see. Fetterman for VP. I don't think so. But by the way, like I said, I've been complimentary of some of the things he said, but make no mistake, folks. Some of the things he's saying are so that the Democrats can use him to help parade Joe Biden around Pennsylvania next time around. So like I say, hey, he's more woke, or more based than some of the Republicans in the Senate. The reality is it's probably a psyop. He's saying a couple things. Maybe he believes them. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But there's no question on my mind that he's saying these things so that the Bidens can go around with him throughout Pennsylvania, and he could be like the moderate nice guy that helps Joe, who's destroyed our state, our economy, our country, is getting us into wars, feel not like that. So, if I joke about something, and there's plenty to joke about with that one, but like, you gotta understand, like, all of these things probably have a plan behind them. He didn't just get woke or based. He will be the guy that they will use to try to win over people in Pennsylvania who would never otherwise vote for Joe Biden. That's the plan. You heard it here first. So don't fall for that one even a little bit, right? That, like, it's crazy. Look outside America for news, but like, where are you gonna go? Like, the BBC is like, it might as well be run by communist China. They're so far left. Let's see. No more rhinos. Yeah, we need 50 JDs, 100%. By the way, JD is the other guy that would be like, it would be another. I've said this on the show. Obviously, he'd be another guy that would be like a top. Let him and Tucker fight it out for VP would be pretty amazing. Right? JD's just been, again, smart, gets it, functioned in the real world, successful business guy, like upbringing that, like, literally from Appalachia. His book was one of my favorites, Hillbilly Elegy. Like, just a great dude. So he's a top 2 or 3 for me as well. So that's a big one. Chip soy, yeah, not gonna happen. I think that was clearly designed to troll me, but so let's see how many people we still got watching, guys. Oh wow, we got a lot of people still watching, I guess. So I'll keep going. I don't care. Sorry, guys. Dinner's gonna be later and cold. What else we got, guys? Still streaming fast there. Rand Paul. I like Rand. I'm actually pretty good friends with Rand, and I honestly I think I lean fairly libertarian on quite a bit of things. So it's interesting. I also like how he calls out the government waste really effectively. I actually started working on a book about that, just because I think it's so important for people just to understand just how stupid. Deadly dose of Laura Loomer and Laura Logan. I assume that was for press secretary. Listen, the Laura Loomer for at least a couple of weeks, she's an animal. It's for a couple of weeks just to warn the press, and if they get a little too insane and too dishonest, which they can't help but do, you bring her back in for a week as punishment. Like that could be pretty fun. Like, have her be like a revolving press secretary. Be like, okay, you guys are getting way over your skis with your bullshit. We're bringing back Laura for a week. Let's go. So that could be fun. And the Rand thing was interesting the other day. Basically being like, hey, I'm never Nikki, because he understands where that goes. So, I actually get that. I know he'll be fine, but I think people needed to understand that. You saw where all the billionaire money went. You saw where all the Democrat funders and the bullshit lawsuits that they're trying against us. Literally the same people funding the plaintiffs in that are funding Nikki Haley, and they ain't conservatives. These were Obama, Biden donors. Byron Donalds, we discussed him earlier. I did. Well, when we do Wesley Hunt next week, that we were in a sort of room at an after party celebrating after Iowa, and him, Matt Gaetz, me, Wesley Hunt, Kim, like a bunch of people, and then some consultants and pollsters and all, and we started having some fun, and you could see it, all of us were having a blast, and then you see some of the consultants who are just they're so afraid of their own shadows so often in the Republican Party. You could be I'll get into that I know Wesley's on next week. We'll have Byron on soon again, but it was pretty funny. So we'll have to get into the details of that one. Yep, Kash Patel. That's one that pops continually. Love to have him somewhere in there in intelligence or justice, or hey, put him in at CIA to destroy some of the BS that's going on there. Gates for VP. Listen, there could be some interesting stuff for him. He certainly speaks his mind and does a good job with that. Musk, listen, I like Musk doing what he's doing. I mean, I think, again, I don't think he's a conservative, but it doesn't matter. Like, if you believe in free speech, that's enough. And so with what he's doing, he's one of those, that's a generational talent in terms of intelligence. I mean, he's literally, created electric vehicles, essentially. He's putting people, into space, and stuff into space, like as a private citizen, and saving free speech. Like, he's doing a lot. Like, I want that kind of genius to do that. If he could go blow stuff up in government and get rid of these, I think it's wonderful. But like, that guy's a generational talent that I want, out there doing that. Even if, again, I don't know if we agree. I think we agree a lot. Actually, so with what we do with Public Square, they bought Every Life diaper, and they created this brand because like all the diaper companies out there are all like, pro-choice, like funding abortion and Planned Parenthood. And we're like, why don't we do one that like doesn't want to kill its future customers and like, give people an option. So again, they're not just funding the woke stuff. So we put up an awesome, and this is all under Public Square. So they did an awesome billboard the other day and a cool commercial that was like, just make more babies. Because, again, we're not doing that as a country. Elon's a big believer. Like, you got to actually repopulate the world to save the world. And I think he's 100% right on that one. And, he actually commented on the post. He's like, I didn't have anything to do with the company, but I agree with the message, which was pretty cool. So, there's probably a lot we actually agree on. He seems like actually a fairly common sense guy. I imagine it's not everything, but he gets it. And, I do respect what he does. X still shadow bans, filters, comments, even hides some. Okay, I think that's fair too. I think it's gotten better. It was, by the way, the best Twitter ever was the month, the 2 weeks between when they announced that Elon was taking over and it actually happened. Because it's like they took all the algorithms off. They took off all the restraints because they were so worried they were going to get caught. It was like it all went away. And then he did it, and you could slowly see that it started creeping back in a little bit. And, I know he fired. I can actually take my earpiece out because I'm not talking to anyone anymore. And they're kind of uncomfortable. You could slowly see that start to creep back in. And it was like, oh, no. Because, again, and he fired 80% of the thing. But the problem is the other 20 are probably still, for the most part, leftists, because that's what's made up in Silicon Valley. It's like, if I put up a post today on Instagram, the thing with, that Elon put, which was the Milei speech. It was like a woman like, let's go, reverse cowgirl. And he was on his laptop listening to the Milei speech. He goes, that's hot. And I was like, that's really funny. And I put it up on Instagram, and in 5 minutes, I was like, you must take this post down for a while. I'm looking. It's like, was there a side boob or something that I'm missing? Like, no, it wasn't. It was, it was provocative, but not more than the shit that falls into my algorithm that, is like, borderline pornographic every day. So I was like, what? Literally, it was like, warning, your account is going to be limited in reach. I literally, Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, retweeted like, aha, this is funny. Like, and I was like, wait, so he's retweeting it. The president who is literally is president of a country, and Elon Musk tweeted it. I put it up on Instagram, and I'm literally like, if you don't take this down, your post and your reach will be limited, and you'll be censored, and you risk. And I'm like, ugh. And again, I still believe in staying on Instagram and fighting on those battles. I'm not willing to cede any of these battlegrounds. I don't think we can afford to do that. I think yeah, you're right. It was so mild. Like, you know what it is? Like, of course, like, guess what? Like, if we're here, someone had sex, okay? Like, I understand they believe differently these days, and boys can be pregnant and all this shit, but like, it happened. Like, it was just sort of funny, and like, I posted it on Twitter, I posted it on there, and I posted it on Instagram. And Instagram, take it down, or you're going to be limited, and So I imagine I'll be limited a lot there, in the coming months, because we're going into election, and simultaneously, by about an hour after that. Don, have you registered to vote? Basically, have you registered to vote for a Democrat? They already started those banners again. So you understand that, Instagram/Facebook, they're going to be all in for the Democrats again. And I can't understand it at this point, but they're definitely going that route. So we shall see. But yeah, make sure you keep following me here. By the way, make sure you share this stuff with people elsewhere, because honestly, I got on Rumble This is actually a good story. I got on Rumble because Twitter threw my father off. Twitter 1.0 threw my father off when he was president of the United States. I was like, holy crap! Like I have a good following here. I got this. Like I was like, I got on Telegram and Rumble like immediately just to try something. Telegram, I think it was the first like American like political figure or whatever it is, or American even, not celebrity, but like, pseudo celeb, whatever the hell it is, to hit like 1 million followers on Telegram. But I feel like Telegram has since sort of, I think with X and with this, when so many of the other apps that came out, I feel like they have a lesser following. I'm like a half at what I used to be because I just think there's fewer people on the site. But it went big right when all the Twitter banning started happening 3 years ago or whatever it is, because they're like, well, I need a place to have a voice. I got to make sure. So Dan Bongino, is that the name that pops up here a lot? He's like, hey man, you got to meet Chris Pavlovsky from Rumble. He's a good friend. Dan was number one. I think I was number two, like verified, like, larger name, million plus follower type thing on other platforms on Rumble. And, I've stayed very involved and very loyal and turned down other things to do it on Rumble because I know that on anywhere else, like I could be shut down in a second. By the way, did you guys, I was on Tim Pool last week out of Iowa. And, I did something, we started talking and it was great conversation. It was long, like 3 hours. And, we started talking about, the rampant sort of pedophilia that's going on around the place. And I think these guys deserve a bullet. And he goes later on, he's like, they're probably going to take this show down. And I was like, because he's on YouTube. And I was like, I don't know. That's just what I think. Like, you can't say that. It's like, I wasn't telling people to incite violence. I'm like, I just think that's what they deserve. Like, it's, if you're molesting children, like death penalty, done. Like that's to me, that's perhaps the most heinous crime there is. And it was like, they were really, I don't know if they took it down or not, but they were legitimately concerned. YouTube was they were like, do we just pull it now? After, we'll just keep the live going till we're done and then just pull it. So I'm not sure if it's even up there. But we had a good time. Got into a lot, and obviously a little different crowd. Happy to talk to everyone, and so it was interesting. But that's the simple stuff. So I got on Rumble because it's legitimately, it's the only real free speech platform out there. I mean, even new Twitter. Well, in France or whatever, Turkey, they say we can't do this, so so we're gonna accommodate so that we can get some message out. It's like, well, but that's not really free speech. Chris was willing to be like, yeah, okay, well, don't show us in your country then. And that takes guts. And that's important. Let's see, watching it on Real America. What are you watching on Real America? They take down the Christian football player. Oh, you see that one on NBC? He just said, I forget what exactly he said, but he wanted to thank his Lord and Savior, like Jesus Christ. Oh, it's so terrible. Oh, God forbid. If you wanted to thank your Lord and Savior, Dylan Mulvaney, 100% fine. You see that video of that lunatic, the CEO of United, drag queen dancing in the streets, pushing that? No, honestly, the flight crews are some of the best people in America to me. I don't know what I assume the non-DEI pilots love me, but even the flight attendants and stuff like that. I can't get on a commercial plane, and I fly 95% commercial coach, without getting a note from them and stuff like that. It's sort of amazing. But I'm looking at that CEO, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? It's insane. But that you can be that much of a whack job and become the CEO of an airline, and then try to push those policies. Planes are going to start dropping out of the sky. You combine that with the FAA stuff. Honestly, it's why we need to do the random live rant Monday. Because, there's just so much to cover there. And just, show clips of these things for the people. Yeah, see, you missed that one. Oh, this one missed it. Everyone missed it. Because, for the most part, most of big tech's going to make sure that you never see it. If I put it up on Facebook, it probably gets taken down or suppressed or whatever it is. So, okay, we'll do a big one on Monday with all of those things. And hit all that. Let's see. The flight crews work hard. No, dude, that's a brutal job. Trust me, there's, other than them, not many people probably fly or travel more than me. And that's a thankless job, man. You fly somewhere, you're delayed, you get stuck, you don't get paid for the delays, you don't get to go home every night because you're in some, that could be cool to travel the world for a little bit. You do that for a career, it's a lot. So they are hardworking people, and like 95% like ultra MAGA. It's sort of actually like literally I was gonna say other than law enforcement, it may be like the most MAGA demographic, which it always shocks me, but I asked my brother, what do you think's the most? He goes, oh, flight crews. Like, I'm like, yeah, like it's weird. So, that's a big one. Have a queue followers can be seen on screen talking to you. Have a queue I'm not sure what you mean, Cutter. I could never do it. I used to fly 90% in your consulting days. I know, dude, it gets harder. As I get older, it gets even harder. What's that one? I know you'll be busy caucusing with your dad. There's no way you're coming back. Okay, so get back the Australia tour. All right, let's win the presidency, and then I'll worry about going back to Australia. Like I said, I tried pretty hard, but it was like too many times. They're like, he's coming. I'm like, we haven't even discussed it. What are you talking about? So we got to get it right, because I don't want to do something and walk into something where, I fly all the way over there, and a bunch of people, like we had thousands of people that wanted to go to this thing, and they'd be like, but like, it wasn't going to happen. I was like, we can't do that. We got to, if we're going to do something right, I just don't want to do that to people. So we got to get it right. But yeah, well, listen, Australia needs, they need some Trump. So does New Zealand, and so does Canada, and so does Ireland, and so does the UK, and all these other places we used to think of as bastions of freedom. Let's see. Comfort and joy, you have a good one. We'll see you soon. Stop the globalists. Well, you listen, that's what it is. You see what's going on. That was an interesting one. You see the Jamie Dimon one? You guys are taking notes, right? Because these are all things we got to just take the video. The Jamie Dimon one. Now, that's an interesting one too. It's like, I don't know, this is someone they wanted to run, to replace Joe Biden against my father as a Democrat, which I'm sure he probably is. But he's like, Trump's policies were pretty right. He was right on this. He was right on China. I didn't love the way he said things, but I was like, is that because he sees the right? Is that because he actually believes that, or is that because he sees the writing on the wall and he's worried what we do to banking? You never know. It's in, it was interesting to see that. And you could see like the MSDNC hosts being like, oh, I can't believe you would say that. Oh, you mean the booming economy was so terrible? Like I'm not saying he's not a leftist. Don't kid yourself. I didn't say that, but it was the first time I saw, let's call it a high power leftist at Davos, at the World Economic Forum, actually be like, nah, Trump was pretty right on a lot of things. The policies were working. Immigration, I mean, he called out immigration. I was like, wait a second. Like, I didn't see that coming. So something's going on. I don't think he's been red-pilled. No, Diamond has not been red-pilled. I think he was, perhaps had a moment of intellectual honesty, which does not happen often from the left these days. So you think Biden will make it to a general election? Okay. Do you guys legitimately think there's there's no game they wouldn't play? I don't. So I just don't know. Do they, try to take out Hunter illegally or whatever it may be? And then he says, so I got to go take care of my family and give him an out. But then they're stuck with Kamala. I don't know. I don't know. Rogan's basically red pill now. He's certainly speaking a lot more common sense. I don't know Joe very well. We used to text back and forth a little bit. I was going to go on a show, but Dana, I think, had set me up, and I'm friendly with Cam Haynes and John Dudley and a bunch of these guys that are on the show regularly, right? And they're like, oh, dude, you'd love Don. And like, we were sort of talking about it, and I was trying to schedule a time to possibly do it, and then sort of, basically it got ghosted. And I get it. He doesn't want to deal with the bullshit, that comes with that. But it was sort of an interesting one, when Dana's like, hey, dude, you'd really like Don. Like, you should. I was like, no, dude, we were talking about when I could get out there and doing it, and then it just sort of disappeared. But I get it. And again, it's like you still, if he's, I think this was even maybe before Spotify, but, think, enough people, his people would have given him hell for giving him a platform. And literally, we could sit there and talk for 3 hours about hunting and fishing. I don't care. But it was just an interesting one because, but I think he's come a long way also. Like, I think he's definitely, dude, they tried canceling him. And I think he was, certainly up until recently, but it's certainly left leaning, right, and on a lot of issues, and that's fine. But then they tried canceling him for even that thing, and I mean he's a comedian, right? Like he once said that someone said the N-word, but he actually said the N-word because someone acted like he was quoting someone, and we're like, canceled. We don't like what you're saying. You were intellectually honest for half a second, and it was like, oh my God. And again, I think that affected him a little bit, but I think he's also now more so now he sees it. He sees the Joe Biden stuff. He sees the BS. He's calling it out, and I think that's important. Again, I'm sure there'd be plenty of things on politics we don't necessarily agree on, but I think it's important to have even a moderate voice in pop culture, because I don't think it almost doesn't exist. It's almost impossible, right? So and again, the Rogan's a lefty, just saying, yeah, maybe, but like, if you're leftist and you may not agree with everything, but you're still willing to call out the nonsense when it is, rather than like, no, Joe Biden, he's 81 million votes, he's the smartest president ever. Like, I don't know. He was known as the dumbest senator in the history of America, according to Ted Kennedy, who told that to my father. And my father told me this stuff a long time ago, like maybe before we were ever in politics, and it didn't matter. So that's that was sort of a known thing in D.C. Like, Joe Biden's never been intelligent. They were just able to use him as, fake blue-collar Joe. But you could sell that to the people when you have billions in ads and the TV's doing it, and they're talking about how blue-collar. I mean, he's never had a blue-collar. I've had more blue-collar jobs and worked more blue-collar stuff than Joe Biden ever did in his life. But that doesn't matter. I'll never be blue-collar Don, and that's fine. I don't care. But they wanted to sell that to middle America, just like they told you, no, we'd never cancel our pipeline, but they did on day one, right? People are onto that. So as long as you're willing to call it out, even if you lean one way or don't agree with me on everything, or don't agree with the conservative platform on everything, like that's fine. That's sort of the nature of America. That's the way it goes. Okay, so I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this one, but. Someone just put the meme up of Ron, and they were going to win Iowa. Remember, all of that stuff, and we got to have some fun with this stuff. But it was like someone basically said, 99 counties, but didn't win a one, and it was funny. And I was like, well, yeah, it's sort of hard to believe that, right? And who was it? Maybe it was Byron, or maybe Wesley Hunt. We were sitting. This was when we were joking around after that night, and they go, oh, no, actually, I don't know if he wants to be called out. He helps us with our show. So I won't name him because, unless he wants to be named, I can give him credit later. He goes, well, listen, Don, in all fairness, because it was about, they spent $30 million just in Iowa, and they knocked on every door in the state, and millions of people, they had 60,000 commitments. Those people didn't actually vote for him, but it didn't matter. And I go, well, that was a formidable operation. We didn't do nearly that amount of door knocking and stuff. And this... He cuts me off. He goes, listen, Don, if door knocking were the only thing that mattered, the Jehovah's Witnesses would be the most popular religion in the world. And I was like, hey, I think the Jehovah's Witnesses could be great, but it was kind of funny. I was like, you make a solid point. You make a solid point. I actually said I wanted to use that on the show. They're like, you really shouldn't say that. I was like, so this is what happens when I go for 2.5 hours. But it was actually sort of a funny point, which is, you just because you go through the paces doesn't mean people are going to be into what you're always selling. So that was an important point to make. It was not a knock on anyone. It's just sort of freaking funny because it's funny. Let's see. Yeah, not a good ROI. No, that was a terrible return on investment. For all, I mean, some of those guys, they're in for $200 million at this point, and it's like, I'm probably not going to win a state. That's an interesting one. Saying the video keeps freezing. That's interesting. I don't see it here. Anyone else noticing that? Okay. Only climate crisis could be dumb enough. Only climate cultists could be dumb enough to vote for RFK. Yeah, just so you hey, I know the guy. I've met him before. Seems nice, like whatever. But he's literally like a rabid leftist that happens to be anti-vax. That's it. That's the one thing, and maybe that's a big one. But honestly, given that we're nuclear war, and he wants open borders. He wants to ban the Second Amendment. He wants, kill, hates farmers. I mean, there's literally, and, then his thing was like, well, people could change. I was like, everything? They change everything? Like, no, you just didn't know what my father was feeling. You've been in politics your whole life. Like, what? There's a difference. You didn't just change everything you believe in the last 6 months. And like magically, and I saw it because, the more biased platforms, I was seeing it on Instagram a lot. Every other post was RFK from people I don't follow. And it was like this. They were literally trying to create like, look, it's another Trump. I'm like, yeah, except for every policy, is the opposite. And then, so yeah, no, understand that was a psyop by the Democrat Party. It continues to be. So I hope he gets on every ballot, and I hope that everyone realizes he is a full-blown leftist, and I hope they vote accordingly, because maybe it draws some votes away from Joe Biden, because he shouldn't be taking any conservative votes unless you couldn't care less about literally anything other than the vax, which is a big one for me. But like, it's not relative to like, hey, we're going to be sent to the gulags if this continues, or free speech, or the Second Amendment, or our border, closing it down, or not mandating ridiculous environmental policies that would destroy our economy, our middle class, our manufacturing sector, and send it all to China, who's going to do nothing about the environment and continue to the scourge and pillage of the earth. Like, yeah, if you want that guy, that's RFK, in my opinion. Again, I think he's a nice guy, but like, don't fall for the psyop. That's a bunch of crap. Let's see. You guys, anything? He's a climate change activist. That was his big thing until 6 weeks ago. It's like open borders, anti-gun, climate change activist. I think he said, what was it? Fuck our farmers was his quote. Like, like, what? That sounds like literally World Economic Forum stuff. Do you see that other video? Coming out of the World Economic Forum, what was the word they used? They wanted to classify farming and fishing as like ecocide. Ecocide is the word, like suicide, but of the ecosystems and of the environment. And they wanted it to be enforced by law enforcement. So if you're a farmer or a fisherman, like, I was like, how do these people, like this was not a thin woman either. This person has not missed a meal, or probably had a few more meals than they should. They want to make farming and fishing ecocide and have it enforced criminally if you do it. I was like, so we're going to have 6+ billion people in the world. They're going to starve to death right now. These are the brilliant ideas coming out of the World Economic Forum. So we should stop listening to these people. We should stop funding them. We should stop investing with them. And as Vivek really pointed out, like, your 401k is probably being invested by those guys, but they're voting your shares the way they want to vote up, not the way you want to vote up. And that's a big difference. We got to be aware of these things. That's why we got to start, again, voting with our wallets, whether it's using the public square, whether it's using, Patriot Mobile for your phone. These kinds of things, supporting the sponsors of shows like this. Like, stop giving your money to the people that hate you. So, I don't know. I'm going to get in trouble for my team because we're all hungry, and I haven't even eaten yet today because my day started a little bit rough with a funeral. So I'm getting a little late, and it's almost 9. But with that, guys, don't forget, like, share, subscribe. We'll have some fun on Monday, but make sure you're passing this on to other people, okay? Make sure that you're forwarding it. If you like a clip, find it, send it. Get it out there so we can get more people watching. We're going to need it, especially in the next year. And honestly, this is the one platform I know that they're not going to throw me off of because they actually believe in what they say. So make sure you're sharing this, that your friends can see it, that they get involved, that they understand what's at stake. We got some breaking news. I lied. Nevada Governor Joe Lombardo will caucus for Donald Trump. Nevada voters, remember, only the caucus results award delegates. Yes, that's a big one. Nikki Haley, she's on the Nevada primary, but that's not like a thing. It's fictitious. So the state of Nevada is trying to confuse voters with a competing presidential primary. It doesn't exist. So make sure if you're in Nevada, like Iowa, it's a caucus. Only the caucus actually awards delegates. Delegates are who votes for you at the Republican National Convention and decides who gets all of the credit. So this is one that the state's playing games, but they'll also try to play some games in the media. Like, she won the Nevada primary. The problem is there's no Nevada primary that actually awards delegates. It's a caucus. It's like Iowa. It's different than most of the other states. So that's a big one to know. Also, well, we'll talk about this more on Monday. If you're up in New Hampshire, make sure you're voting on Tuesday. They're trying to get a bunch of the Democrats to vote for Nikki Haley. So if you're independent, clearly not voting for Joe Biden or Nikki Haley. So, get out there and vote. If you're libertarian, get out there. Clearly, our platform aligns so much better with you guys. But don't let them play the games that they're clearly trying to play. So much depends on that. So that's some interesting stuff. Don't forget it for Nevada, which comes up pretty shortly after New Hampshire. But again, you can see the games they're going to start playing already. Oh, she won. There's blood in the water. We're going to continue this. It's all bullshit. So you guys are the best. Don't forget to check out our incredible sponsors. Check out Patriot Mobile. Again, you keep your phone. You keep your number. But you stop giving the majority of your money to woke companies that hate you. You go to patriotmobile.com/triggered. patriotmobile.com/triggered. Fast, free activation. You keep your number. You keep your phone. I have one. It's great. Like, stop giving your money to woke corporate. Go to twc.health, like the wellness company, /triggered for a 15% discount on the emergency medical kit. The instructions on how to use it. That way, if one of these disasters that seem to be looming more and more every day ever do strike, you are prepared and you can take care of it. Whether it's COVID, whether it's a tick bite, or anything in between, be prepared. That's a big part of this. So twc.health/triggered. You guys are the best. Thank you very much. We'll have some fun on Monday, and I'll talk to you then.